Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2021 California Seth Conference.
Welcome. The day has finally arrived. We're finally here in this particular moment in time and space where we get to initiate this conference that we've all been waiting for. So, welcome to the 2021 California Seth Conference. We are so excited that you're here, and we're excited that we're able to participate in this amazing co-creation. We have 6 wonderful speakers coming up today and 6 more coming up tomorrow, and we will have many surprises along the way as well. Now, a lot has changed 2021 in all our lives. Of course, we've gone through massive changes, but the conference itself also has gone through quite a lot of change as well. Of course, all of our previous conferences were in person, and they were initiated, or one of the main initiators was Lawrence Davidson. And as many of you know, he has crossed over to the other side. He has made his transition, and several other members of the Seth community have also made their transition. So things are looking a little bit different in many, many ways, in many dimensions. So we want to honor those changes and honor them as a community together. Now, of course, we are experimenting with this incredible online format, and I really believe that this enables information and speakers to come together in a truly unprecedented way, because we truly are a global community, and we're recognizing the fact that we can bring people together from all corners of the world, from many of the continents of the world, and truly create and co-create an intersection in time and space that is both beautiful and absolutely profound as well. So welcome to this incredible co-creation. So I also, with that, want to say that, those of us who have produced the conference, we're not professional broadcasters. What this is it's all of us acting on our passion. It's listening to the calling, to the impulse, as Seth would say, and really running with it, acting on it, and step upon a step building it. So, we're not professionals in the sense that I'm saying that I hope this inspires all of you to act on your passion, because you really never know where those impulses are leading you. They're coming from your higher mind, and when you start acting on them, beautiful things begin to manifest in our daily lives. So may this inspire all of us to act on our passion and to really to go for it, to act on those impulses and to translate them into action in our lives. Now, of course, we are here today and tomorrow to share the Seth material, and there's a specific spin we want to put on the material, which is application. We're really all about action and implementation, and really rolling our sleeves up and just taking it to that level where we're implementing the material in our daily lives, where this material makes a difference. We've all been reading these books for years, some of us decades, and we want to live lives that reflect these beautiful truths that have been translated to us by Jane Roberts. So we want to honor that legacy by acting on it, and to truly embody these principles from the inside out. So our theme then, therefore, is practical Seth, or Seth applied, if you will. Now, as you surmise, I will be your host for the conference, and co-host and chat moderator will also be Lilia Aguero. You will be meeting her shortly. And of course, Jeff Kiefer is our co-host as well as technical wizard, shall we say, and co-producer of the California Seth Conference. So much appreciation to all the behind the scenes of these two wonderful individuals. And so moving right along, the truth is that we're having so much fun doing this that, we're acting on our passion, that we are actually using this as a launchpad to create a production company. And we definitely want to do these kinds of activities again. And we truly want to express ourselves in this way, to raise consciousness, to share these kinds of materials, and to make this available for so many people out there who are inspired by these kinds of materials. So definitely look for more productions from us. We're creating a little group called the Modern Mystic Mystery School. So you'll definitely be seeing more from us in the future as well. And so with that, let's go ahead and talk about the flow. The flow. So we have 6 incredible speakers for today, and we will break this up into manageable units. In that sense, we will have 3 speakers, and then we'll have a 30-minute break, and then we'll have 3 more speakers. And then tomorrow, on Sunday, we will follow a very similar format. We will have 3 speakers, a 30-minute break, and then 3 more speakers. Now, that being said, of course, we are going to throw in some surprises along the way. So you might be seeing some never before seen videos and never before released videos, as we have been digging through our archives and finding some beautiful gems in there. So we look forward to sprinkling a few surprises along the way. Now, we will also, for most of our speakers, have a question and answer session. So this is an opportunity to interact live with the speakers. So if you are watching this in the live as it is happening, then you do have the opportunity to type into the chat questions, and then our lovely co-host Lilia Aguero, she is going to read those into the Q&A discussion with the speaker live. So most of our speakers do have the live Q&A section. So if you do want to participate, we definitely encourage you to start typing in your questions during that presenter's talk, and then Lilia will be organizing those and bringing them into the question and answer session. So we definitely look forward to that nice, lovely live interaction with everybody. Okay, so as I have said, look for a few good surprises along the way as well. Now, in terms of our schedule for today, our 6 speakers for today are going to include Miles Blount, followed by Chiron O'Keefe, and concluding that section with Robert Waggoner. Then we're going to have a 30-minute break so that we all can catch a breather, let some of this material assimilate, give us a chance to take a break, to rest our eyes, and then we will continue with Mickey Lowe, followed by Helen Stewart, and ending today, Saturday, with EJ Jam coming all the way from Australia. So we're excited. We're super excited about this lineup, as well as tomorrow's lineup. It's really looking like incredible content is coming to us. So we're just super excited to be in this vortex and in this flow of energy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our first speaker. Our first speaker is Miles Blount, and he is a regular presenter at several meetup groups, both in Florida as well as in Washington. And he's been doing this since about 2008, and he's had many participants in these groups, from 20 to 50 participants, and they focus on topics such as law of attraction, but definitely with Seth's principles involved as well. Now, Miles has been studying the material for a very long time. It turns out that in 1972, he began with Seth Speaks. So he's been reading this for for many decades now. And so we really look forward to hearing how he has worked with the material. You see, because he has actually applied the material not only to his personal life, but also to his career with remarkable and incredible results. So we're really looking forward to hearing the wisdom that will come through this wonderful being. Now, for him, every day is an exciting adventure that begins with studying the material and preparing it for these meetup groups that then he gets to share his insights of the material there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Miles. He will speak on creation in a world without time and space. So without further ado, let's go ahead and cue up Miles and enjoy this incredible presentation that's coming to us. Thank you.
Friends, it's so nice to be here with you today, doing something that's so close to my heart, which is talking about Seth and the impact that it's had on my life and the impact I believe that it can deliver to your life as well. My talk today is going to be on creation in a world with no time and no space. Now, before I get started, I want to just appreciate some of the people that have come before us, before me, and say a thank you. So the first one is Rick Stack. Rick has put together, there's no bigger supporter of the Seth material than Rick, and the Seth search engine was one of the highlights of my life. I had thought that if I won the lottery, I would spend up to $1 million to get a Seth search engine. And one day I turned it on and it was free, and it's on my desktop and I use it all the time. The second person I'd like to thank is Linda Maiden Dahl for her books, her Facebook group, and I think she was the first for me, and now there are many others, so I think she's been a real light for all of us. The third person I want to thank is Mary Dillman. She was my hero. She left her job to go manage the Seth archives at Yale. Mary has recently passed, and she asked me to stop my monthly contribution. So I did that, and I've redirected that to the Seth House, which I was also supporting. So the Seth House has a warm place in my heart as well. I'm just thrilled with the work that they're doing there. So I want to say thank you to them as well. And there's so many others that I can't go on and still have any time left for the talk, but a heartfelt thanks to all of you that have pioneered the way. Now, before I get started, I want to talk about honoring beliefs. So what I'm going to share with you today is my journey and my beliefs. Yours may be different than mine, and if they are, that's just fine. In fact, I have no interest in changing your beliefs at all. Whatever they are, they're perfect. I'm just sharing what's worked for me and what I'm using on my journey to create the life of, well, I think it's fair to say the life of my dreams, because the life that my beloved Reba and I have together is truly spectacular. Now, this is my passion, my journey. So, when I spoke at the Seth Conference in March of 2014, it was understanding and interpreting our world as a dream, and today it's about creation in a world with no space and time. I try and go as deep as I can to take as much advantage of the brilliance and insight that Seth brought to us through so many volumes, at least 40. I noticed that Rick has about 50 different books on his site, all one way or another related to Seth. So truly a passion of mine. So in 1972, I was working in a steel mill. I was a melter. I got the best job in the plant because I could do fractions. And I was sitting there in front of my furnace one day, and the guy next to me walked by and said, "You have to read this book." And he literally gave me Seth Speaks. And I thanked him. I had hardly talked to him before. The steel mill's a very noisy place. It doesn't lend itself to conversation. I sat down and opened that book, and it was like an explosion going off inside of me. I couldn't read more than a paragraph or two before I had to sit it down and walk around. And friends, 48 years, 50 years later, it's still the same for me when I open up my Seth books. I can't count how many I've bought because I've given away so many. Now with Kindle, I've gifted people the Seth books. And in 2007, I retired. And when I retired, I knew what I wanted to do, which was speak about the Seth material, and pretty much full time. So what I did was I found meetups where they did something called Law of Attraction, but that didn't faze me at all. I knew that what I wanted to talk about was the Seth material, and that was an entry in. Now, in the early days, there were no groups, and that was really difficult for me. I had started my journey in 1960 with a book my mother gave me called Many Mansions by Gina Sermonara. It was based on channeled information from Edgar Cayce. And that book changed my life. I grew up in a family that felt like there were some problems with religion, that religion had actually caused more trouble than it brought good in the world. And since that was a deeply held belief of theirs, we got an endless stream of confirmation. And yet when I read this Edgar Cayce material, it became clear to me that there was something deeper going on, the idea of a God or an all that is. And that started my journey. Now, what I want to be clear about is I haven't vetted this material to make sure that every word I say is directly related to Seth. I just don't have time for that. It's my life and my passion. So occasionally other areas of interest might find their way into this presentation. And just bear with me on that. With the Seth search engine, you can check everything. And I think most things you'll find are a direct correlation. But if not, I've also worked with my dreams. And over the course of my life, I've done over 15,000 dreams. And they have a couple of characteristics. The first one is, I've never had a dream tell me somebody else should change. It's always me. The second characteristic is that I learn in my dreams. I actually have physical experiences, and I go to my dreams to experience the Seth material in a deeper way. I want it to be experiential rather than, for instance, a thought or an idea or a reason, because it has an even deeper impact on my life. So, famously, Seth told us we create our own reality, and that's now a foundation of our new age. He also said many times that there's no time and no space, that they're an illusion. And he's actually gone over how to make that judgment based on comparisons to other realities. For instance, especially the dream reality, where there is no time, no space, not even any gravity. So the question is, how does creation play out in our reality? How does creation work in a reality with no time and no space? And how does this empower us? What new perspective do I need to bring to the table to utilize these concepts? And most important, how can I use this to get results in an ongoing basis in my life? So I want to go over a couple of basics first. And the first one is that all that is love. And because all that is love, I use that as a foundation point. So in my world, everything is all that is. In fact, Seth said that. There is nothing in existence that isn't all that is, which means simultaneously that everything is the love of all that is. That's what I'm not sure the exact word I should use, but I'm going to say consciousness of everything is based on the love of all that is. Now, because there's no time, there can't be any cause and effect in physical reality. And Seth has gone over that and told us that this reality is an illusion. All it is simply an ongoing group of pictures. Think of a movie projector with film going through it like the old days, frame by frame. Well, when it gets to 24 frames a second, you can't tell the difference between physical reality and the illusion that you would see, for instance, up on the movie screen. And yet, Seth explains to us that countless times a second, this reality is recreated. So, the next important point is this, that it's recreated new, completely new, which means that there's a 0 point. There's a level point at which point at every particle in existence of this reality, this universe, and every universe is in communication because it's at the same 0 point, we could say. So everything is working behind the scenes to support the illusion of this reality telepathically. Now, the next point I want to make is about our feeling tone. Seth talked about our feeling tone beautifully and very enjoyable. And he even talked about feeling tones as it related to the seasons. So, what is our feeling tone? And I want to explore this based on no time. So our feeling tone is who we are right now based on our focus and our beliefs. Our beliefs create an emotion or a feeling in us, and that emotion or feeling becomes the score or the script through which, or we can even call it the filter, through which the energy constantly flows through us as God. We are all God ourselves. So that energy flows through us and gets projected out into physical reality. So, this is the important point. Because there's no time, it's instantaneous. In other words, it's not a compilation of things that have happened in our past, except insofar as it's the beliefs that we put in place. So every instant, energy is going to flow through me. It's going to flow through my feelings. It's going to flow through my beliefs, which create feelings. And then it's going to get projected out into reality. So, each instant when the world's recreated, it's recreated new from the 0 point. So every instant is a clean slate. There's nothing coming from the past. There's nothing coming from the future. It's all what is right now in this moment, which Seth calls the present moment or the spacious present. So the sum total of my beliefs create the filter that energy is going to flow through, and that's what gets projected now into the present, into what I see in the next moment. Now, in one case, it's inside of me. In the other case, it's outside of me. So the moment before, when it's inside of me, it's going through the filter. The next moment, it's what I'm seeing in my reality, in my world. And it's an exact, incredibly exact projection of who I am. In fact, Seth goes over the fact that there are no accidents. But he also explains remarkably that the consciousness units that make up the atoms, and he says it takes millions of consciousness units to make up an atom. And of course, the atoms are another energy gestalt that make up molecules, another energy gestalt that make up cells, another energy gestalt that makes up our body. These atoms have free will, value fulfillment, and dreams. So they have a choice about where they're going to project into expression next. So in order for anything to show up in our reality, in almost an infinitely deep layer of cooperative bridges or cooperative actions have taken place in order to assemble the reality that we see and we view as physical. So there are no accidents. It takes an incredible cooperative effort that goes on instant by instant and millions of times a second. In fact, far more than that. But we're not going to go there right now. So, the way I'm feeling right now is creating my reality right now. So if I want to change my reality, as we know, we need to do two things. We need to pay attention to what we're focusing on, and we need to pay attention to our beliefs. And Seth has given us a lot of wonderful tools to work with our beliefs. And Nancy Ashley has written 3 fabulous books that Rick Stack is now publishing that I can't recommend enough. My first book literally fell to pieces, and I got Nancy to autograph the other books when I went to the Seth Conference. So, a basic tool is this. When you're feeling bad, or when you're feeling something and you want to determine what it is, say this to yourself. What would I have to believe in order to feel this way? Now, the universe is not subtle. It usually puts it on a 2x4 and hits you right between the eyes. It's not hidden. Seth tells us we're not limited. One of the most powerful beliefs we can have is that we are not limited. And second, nothing is hidden. Nothing is hidden. So ask yourself what belief you would have to have in order to feel a certain way, the feeling that you're experiencing. And when you find that belief, what you want to do is say to yourself, is this belief limiting or is this belief based on fear? And if it's either one of those two things, then we need to look for a different belief. Now, up to this point, the way we've lived our lives is we've believed that beliefs are truths, and for the most part, unchangeable, which could not be farther from reality. Beliefs are very changeable. The first time I learned this was when I was 19, and I wrote my philosophy of life. I decided I wanted to challenge myself to see what I believed and how I wanted to live my life. The first shocking thing that happened to me was, after I'd done that, only a couple of weeks, I realized that my beliefs were already changing. And 10 years later, I realized that almost nothing that I wrote hadn't changed. It had all changed. It's a constant process. So our beliefs do change. All I'm saying is, if you find that you're living your life from somebody else's assumptions, or heaven only knows where you might have picked up beliefs. I have a dear friend that said it took him a while to realize he was living his life from his parents' beliefs, some of them that were prejudiced, and some of them even bigoted about other people. And he said, that's not going to work for me. That's not the person I am. That's not how I want to live my life. So he changed his beliefs. Now, let me give you an incredibly powerful belief that I use as a foundation stone. And later on, I'm going to talk about beliefs and grids. That belief is that people are good, that the universe is of superlative good intent. Those are Seth's words. And furthermore, that the only place that bad exists is inside us. Now, let me say that again. Everything is all that is. Everything is love. Love, as Seth explains to us, is joy and freedom, and I add that little caveat of peace, because if I really believe that, it gives me some peace, and I do really believe that. So when I start from the place that everything is good, of superlative good intent, that gives me a powerful touchstone, a lighthouse to live my life by. So if I'm not in alignment with that, well, then I'm going to try and take a minute to examine it. So, I had a dream, and in this dream I wanted to understand how it was that I was creating my reality. And in this dream I found myself as the all that is, in an incredibly spacious present. And I realized that from that place I got to choose anything, including my beliefs. I got to make a choice. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about beliefs and choice. Seth calls them suggestions or intentions. So this is a nuance that's oh so powerful in how we create our reality. If we pick the feeling that we want, the universe will line up to deliver that. So the most important question you can ask yourself is, what do I want? 10,000 times a day. Just keep asking that question, because it gives you a focus. We're the creator. We're creating it all. Where am I going to turn my powers of creation? To what I want, and actually create a little visualization. The hows are none of our business, so we're not going to pay any attention to them at all. If we find ourselves wobbling, we turn our attention to what we want and activate our visualization. And while we're at it, since we're already there, we can add a little bit of spice to it and say, wouldn't it be nice if it was even better? If it was even better. And that becomes a powerful tool to refocus us when we find ourselves taken away from the way we want to live our life. In other words, when we find ourselves angry or upset or feeling depressed, what we can do is turn our focus to what we want and hold that. Now, there's something that happens that's truly amazing when you start to believe. If you have faith in the good in the end, then you have peace. If you have faith in the good in the end, then you have peace, because everything is just a step on the way to that wonderful end. Now, let's see. Just give me a second here. So, we know that we get a clean slate every instant. We can turn our focus or our beliefs to what we want. It's like a musical score that we use to then create the reality that's projected outside. So when I'm looking outside, if I see things that I don't like, it's because I've created them. And I've created them in my now, not sometime in the past and not sometime in the future. So I want to take a moment here and speak about memory. So memory is predicated on the very idea of time, but there is no time. So any memory that we have is a memory we're dragging into our present moment and living our life from. So if you have memories that are not serving you, in other words, if you don't feel good about the memories you have, then let them go. It's not who you are right now. So why would you drag it into your present? And let me try and put it in a context. Every instant, every second, millions of times a second, this reality is created new from the 0 point. That means you're created new, your body's created new, so your body can never get older than a millionth of a second, except that we believe that. And that, what are you going to do? There's countless yous that are out there exploring their own reality. Just like we know that we animate our thoughts. We're a thought of all that is. When we have thoughts, they go out to their own existence. So my point is this, that if it's not serving you, just set it aside. Give it up. It ceases to exist, literally, when we don't turn our attention to that in that direction, when we don't turn our focus in that direction and give it energy. Now, everything exists eternally. All that is infinite, not limited. All that is fully explores every probability, every option, every one. So nothing gets lost. Nothing is ever destroyed or hurt. In fact, it's just the opposite. Science tells us about conservation of energy. Couldn't be further from the truth. We individually literally create energy ourselves. And all that is has no limit to the energy. So the universe, in our reality, shows up expanding because it is expanding. We're expanding the energy in this universe. And just as a quick aside, we don't need any justification. Our existence in this reality alone energetically creates the space for more dolphins, babies, and flowers. That's all the justification we need, the fact that we committed to coming here. So, let's go back to, is what you believe serving you? And if it's not, find beliefs that do serve you. And in a minute, I'm going to get out some grids. My wife and I do grids of beliefs. So if there's something that we're struggling with, we just write down the beliefs and put them on a grid. And that is a very powerful tool. In fact, it's a way to overcome negativity and depression. We're going to take a brief moment here in a minute for me to take a drink, but I'll go over this first. And it's this, that if you go over your beliefs, and your beliefs are so much stronger than the negative beliefs, and you keep going back to those beliefs that empower you, they will literally crush the old limiting fear-based beliefs. They will literally crush it out of our existence because it's not who we are. That's not what we believe. When we focus on the empowering beliefs that we believe, and I'll read some of those later, then we can turn our focus to what we want, and it also is a huge help in moving out of a negative state that we may have found ourselves slipping into. And that happened to me recently, and my wife looked at me and smiled and said, well, can you find something better that you believe? And I've been doing this so many years, I can always find something better to believe, and that really lifted me out of that state that I'd put myself in of anger and upset at the way some people were acting in the world. So there's no creation in Framework 1, which Seth refers to as physical reality. So creation starts with a decision. So decide what you want. Create the feeling of that in the end. How do you want to feel in the end? Now, what makes this so powerful is the universe will do whatever it takes, stand on its ear and spit wooden nickels. Seth has some really eloquent quotes about how it'll make all the pieces come together, fit together from multiple dimensions, multiple realities, in order to support the continuation of that feeling that you have. So if you feel bad, the universe aligns itself there. Now, one of the things that I noticed when I was in my dream was, as the center of the universe, every particle of the universe aligned to me. And I also experienced that every particle of the universe was also the center of the universe itself. So this was not something unique to me, but it is something built into the dimensionality of all that is. That every particle, every instant is the center of the universe. So we're infinitely loved and supported. So the point is, when we make a decision about how we want to feel and we focus on that, if our beliefs don't support that, if the universe will now send us beliefs that do support that. So if you're struggling with, well, what belief would I have to have in order to feel better or to navigate the situation I'm in, the universe will send you those beliefs in order to sustain that. So drive your stake in the ground and hold your focus to where you want to go and believe in the end. Have faith in the end that you, as all that is, as the creator, have the say about where this is going. Excuse me. Because when good always conquers separation and limitation. The self is not limited. So let me just pursue that a little bit. You know, we cover lots of stuff here. And sometimes people get lost in, especially in our reality, with self-judgment and self-criticism. Look, let's make this as basic as we can. If you're a good, loving, kind person that's compassionate, you're on the track. That's all you need to know. All the other stuff is like icing on the cake, and it empowers you to maybe create a little more effectively. But the fact that at your heart, you're trying to line up with the heart of all that is, the joy and the freedom that comes with alignment with all that is, then you're going to have a huge impact on your body, on the people in your life, on this world, and on the reality in general. And make a big contribution to moving to the new earth. Now, I want to talk a little bit about EEUs and CUs. So EEUs are electromagnetic energy units and CUs are consciousness units. So how does this work? So when you have an emotion, you create, instead of electromagnetic energy units, I'm going to call them emotional units because that's the way they are for me. You create emotional units. Now, the bigger your emotions, the more units that you create, the bigger the pathway. And consciousness units love to create. They live for creation. And they want what we want even more than we want it. So when you create an emotional pathway, the consciousness units follow it right into your life and then create what we call our physical reality. So our ability to work with our emotions is very powerful and an integral part of what's happening in our world now, because these units, consciousness units, emotional units, create a field, and the field is what's creating our reality. So the next point I want to make about it is, some people think a lot about ascension. You know, am I going to make it to the new earth? Or am I far enough along on my spiritual path? Look, you can't do it wrong. Seth has told us we're all eternal. Every particle of existence was part of all that is before the beginning. Before the beginning. So we've been here from the beginning. So we're an integral part of the whole, everything that's going on. Everybody is on their own timeline. My getting to a place of residence in a higher dimension, or ascending, or a new earth, whatever we want to call it, is not dependent on you, and you are not dependent on me. Now, so with that, I want to talk a little bit about, so our lives are a cooperative effort. I was stunned when I was studying Edgar Cayce, and we did this book, Search for God, had 12 lessons in it, and I couldn't believe it. The first lesson was cooperation. The universe has infinite levels of cooperation. So, the second thing is, Seth told us that we need to take this reality seriously. So, if we see somebody hurt or suffering, it's not that they're just playing a part in our life. They're an actor that's playing a role to reflect us back to us. No, the point is, can we take our consciousness and use that to empathize with them, to understand them, to see what kind of needs they have that are not being met, so that we can be uplifters, because this is a real opportunity for all of us. So if you're a good person, you're 90% of the way there. Now, the path is 100 miles long, and none of us is more than a few feet down the path. So let's not get too carried away. And let's also not get carried away with, this person is smarter than me or not as smart as me. That doesn't work either, because we don't have intelligence in our body, except insofar as, in terms of our consciousness. Our intelligence resides in our connection to our spirit, and every cell of our body is directly connected to all that is, so it has its own wisdom. Our gut has its own wisdom. But in terms of consciousness, there's no intelligence that resides in our brain. Our brain is the most exquisite transmitter and receiver of vibration in the universe. In fact, our whole body is the most exquisite creation in the universe itself. We all have a universal mind, or a mind in our soul, and that mind connects to all intelligence. So there's nobody that's more intelligent or less intelligent than anybody else, because we all have access, by being still and meditating, to the wisdom that's inside of us. So there's nobody that knows more or less than you, so be sure not to give your power away. Don't ask another person what you should do. You might ask them for what their experiences are or what insights they may have. But when you ask them what to do, you're giving away your power. You are the one that should make that decision, because you're the one that's the creator. And nobody knows better than you. Nobody knows better than you on your path. And we're all on our own timeline. Now, so we're not dependent on anybody else, and nobody else is dependent on us. Now, let's talk about alignment with others. Alignment with love. So, as all that is love, joy and freedom. The way we feed our souls with joy, we all thrive on freedom. We all know that when somebody's trying to tell us what to do or how to do it, all our hackles go up. It just doesn't work. So, what we want to do is extend that same environment to other people. In other words, bring them joy and freedom in whatever they're doing. Now, nobody's on the wrong path. Everybody's life is exactly perfect, right where it is, and so is ours. Now, they may be going through struggles, but as Seth explains to us, we're here for value fulfillment. So as we go through value fulfillment, in other words, let me put it like this. Are you being authentic? Will you stand up for your truth? Will you speak up and stand for what you believe? So, at this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and summarize this. What we want to do is focus on what we want. When we don't feel good, it's telling us we have limiting beliefs. Examine those beliefs and replace them with something that's more powerful. An hour seemed like a long time to me, but I never did have time to get to the grid of beliefs that support making changes inside myself. But it's easily done, and Seth has numerous exercises out there, and Nancy Ashley's books tell you how to do it in great detail. So find beliefs that make your heart sing and that resonate with you, and then use those beliefs as a stepping stone to change your life and change where you want to go. Now, it is okay to think of this as a game in a certain sense. Now, a game where we care and are compassionate about other people, but a game where we change our beliefs and see the impact that it has on our lives, and just see how good you can make your life. We're here for joy, and we can have joy, but we made this a really challenging environment to test our mettle. And so finding our way to that place is not always easy. But ask yourself, what do you want? Find a way to focus on that with feeling and emotion. Understand that every instant is a clean slate, and that where I turn my focus and the amount of emotion that I bring to what I want is going to determine how quickly the consciousness units find their way into my life, because your beliefs will block them from creating. The consciousness units will find their way into our lives and create a wonderful life for us. Now, So, drive your stake in the ground. Believe in good. Believe in yourself. And when you start to find yourself wobbling, turn your focus to what you want. Thank you. And at this point, we're going to take some questions.
What about others?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Luis. We could easily do a whole hour on that in itself, but I'm going to give you a brief synopsis. My world, everybody is all that is. In other words, everybody is infinite. If you're in my world, you're playing a role that reflects me back to me. with exquisite precision. So I listen carefully to everything you do and everything you say, because you're reflecting me back to me. That way I can always trust this world to be a reflection, an accurate, extremely accurate reflection of who I am on the inside. Now, if you're in my world, I'm almost certainly in your world doing the same thing. Now, it sounds like this is a role, and it is a role, but it's a role for a point. The point is, how are we dealing with this, whatever it is that's coming up? Are we dealing with it in a loving, compassionate, kind way? Or are we dealing with it in some kind of a superfluous way, like, oh, this person is a problem, this person is not me, this person's outside of me. We're all one. There's nothing outside of us. And second of all, they come bearing gifts. So in a sense, the worse the person is, the bigger the gift they come bearing, because they have agreed to play this really miserable role in our part, in our play, in our life, in order that we can see what it is that we are on the inside. Now, I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. And again, we could easily talk about this for an hour. But the point is this, that our beliefs are creating who they are. Our beliefs are creating the world that we're in. So when you're looking at them, take a moment to look inside yourself and see if you can find where those feelings are inside of you. And if you can, you've gone a long ways. Now, there was a self that was created in that instant that happened, a self that we almost certainly rejected. And that's why, and so if you open your arms up and embrace that self and say, I know you were doing the best you could at the time, then you can accomplish some real healing. But let's talk about the process a little bit. Something does not show up in physical reality unless it's been going on in your mind and it's come up countless times, probably 1,000, certainly hundreds. But it's based on beliefs or assumptions that we've accepted, and so we haven't looked at them, or we don't want to look at them for whatever reason. You know, it takes courage to ask yourself, what do you want? Because what if it's not what you want right now? So, but it couldn't get our attention. It's something inside ourselves that wants to be healed. It couldn't get our attention. So, eventually it finds its way into physical reality, a thought, a newspaper article. And then it finds its way into our reality on the other side of the world. And then it'll get closer and closer. And next it's your neighbor. And next it's in your body. So it's something that needs our attention. And next it's an illness, and next it's a chronic illness. It's all asking for our attention. So when we give our attention to whatever it is and there's no cause and effect, so every picture in our life is just a message. All it's trying to do is help us get the message.
And do others have their own existence?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody is in their own bubble, sacrosanct there. Nothing can make its way inside the bubble unless you're a vibrational match for it. If you create emotions that are good and you create an upward spiral, you'll find your life being magical. If you create emotions that are threatening and upsetting and depressive, well then you're going to tap into other beliefs like that. But in the bigger picture, all that is pure positive energy. All that is love. So it's a real testament to our ability to create that we can swim against the energetic flow of pure positive energy in order to create negativity in our lives. Now, I know a lot of people are out there groaning right now going, oh, how could that be? Just trust me. If you'll work on this and take a look at it, have the courage to step toward your fears. Don't do anything rash, but just step towards your fears. And the more that you do that, the more they will evaporate.
And how do we create bad things in our own lives?
Well, I think I briefly touched on that. First we have a limiting belief. Then we give it emotion. Once we give it emotion, once we have the thought, there's no such thing as fiction. Every thought we have, we're a thought of all that is. Our thoughts go out to their own existence, and they form, as Seth said, energy gestalts, where like attracts like. So if we're not careful about where we're putting our focus and what our beliefs are, and our feelings are telling us what our beliefs are at every moment. When you're feeling bad, you're off track. When you're feeling good, you're on track. It's straightforward. So if you're feeling bad, you need to do a course correction and find out what the belief is that's interfering with your ability to deliver the good life that you want for yourself, your family, and others.
So tell us some strategies to overcome bad thoughts and emotions.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis. This is really powerful. And I touched on it very briefly in the talk. So get your grid of beliefs. Get your grid of good beliefs. And Seth goes over quite a few, but common sense will tell you what they are. All that is love. People are all that is. Therefore, people are loved. Therefore, people are good. So inherently inside of every person, inside of this world, inside of this universe, is the pure positive energy of love of all that is. Joy and freedom and even peace if we believe in the end and can have the faith to hold that. So when you review those beliefs, they will literally quash the other negative beliefs. In other words, you've filled your tank up. Now, let me go through a quick process here that Reba and I have really changed our lives. Spend some time each day on love, feeling love for yourself, feeling love for others, feeling love for our country, feeling love for every person, feeling love for the world, feeling love for nature. If you're still struggling, get up and move around. Get out into nature. I've got, this is a little bit, 2,000 pages of my favorite Seth quotes. I don't know how many, but I literally will open up my file and just start reading anywhere. Also, you probably noticed, and Seth has told us, that every time you read a book, a Seth book, or any book for that matter, it's going to be different. And it absolutely is. So when you open that book, just randomly open it and look at it, there'll be something there for you to help you deal with whatever it is that you're dealing with and get yourself onto a positive track. And be sure you know who your support system is, who you can call, who you can tell. Luis is one of my support systems. My beloved wife is a huge support for me. And she won't let me off the hook either. She'll go, "You're upset? Well, who's creating that?" "Well, it's me. It's always me." "Can you find a belief or a thought that makes you feel better?" And I always can. Unfortunately, what I usually am experiencing is I've worked my way into a corner where I don't feel powerful, and I like being angry because that makes me feel powerful.
Where should we start if you're a newcomer to these concepts? What is the sequence that you suggest in terms of books and materials that are available?
Well, this Seth Conference is a great one because it's free, but also Rick Stack offers Seth conferences. I've been to 3 of them with some of my friends. We are retired. We join together to come up with the money, and then we'll set at somebody's house. The conferences are fantastic. Also, Rick has a starter set of the books. Also, join Linda Maiden-Dahl's Facebook group, and now there are other Facebook groups in Australia and in Scotland and England. Join those groups, and they're a constant source of upliftment, a constant source of beliefs and systems that'll support you in moving forward. But remember the most important thing. The most important thing is heart. Are you compassionate? Are you kind? Or if you never read another book, but you come to the world from that place, a good heart. You know, if something happens and you make it right, if somebody gets upset and you realize you're the cause and you talk to them and you apologize. If there's something in your life that's not working, start there. How do you get peace in the world? Start in your own family. So, and the next part is that Reba and I have learned is baby steps. If you try and do it all at once in a big bite, you're going to make yourself a failure every time. But if you do a little bit every day, at the end of the year, you will simply be astounded at where you're at. Because you got 10 times further than you would have got if you took that big step, one big bite right now. So every day, Reba and I sit down. First thing we do is our dreams. And then the second thing we do is our spiritual practices. And anymore, we get to what's going on in our life. What's going on in our life is what we want to deal with. So I didn't get a chance to cover this, but I've like all of us, I've had a lot of challenges in my life, especially when I was young. Right after I got married, my wife got end-stage cancer. We had a new baby. I use these materials every day, and they created miracles, one miracle after another. In fact, our life is miracles. There's no cause and effect in physical reality. So when you start using these principles, you're going to change your life. You're going to change the world for the better, and you're going to have a better life. And today, our lives, I'm 73, she's 75, our lives are so good, we literally pinch ourselves every day. We're just joy-filled. Not that we don't have, it seems like the problems we realize that we have more areas to grow in today than ever before. So you could say that this is the best of times and also the worst of times.
And Miles, do you have groups? Where can we find you?
Well, I have a meetup group called Leaps and Bounds. It's a subgroup of Dawn's.
Dawn's Love?
Yeah, thank you.
In the Tampa Bay area.
Tampa Bay area, yeah.
Right.
So I meet every Tuesday. 1 week we'll do a conversation, and then the next week I'll do a short talk on something almost always deeply Seth related, and then we'll discuss it.
Is that the only group that you have going right now?
Yes, at the moment that's the only group that I have going. I tried to do some other work, but because this is my life and my love and my passion, I've gotten a little far away from my ability to relate these concepts and ideas to other people, very unfortunately, because it's so close to my heart. I've done 1,000 of these meetups since I retired. And so it's, and actually I get up every morning inspired. I write a presentation almost every day. But, yeah, for now, that's where it's at.
Thank you so much, Miles. I am sure that people are going to be looking for where you are and what you're doing, because you have a wealth of beautiful information that you have been able to integrate into a beautiful life.
Thank you so much, Luis, and I'm deeply grateful for your help and support. It's impossible for me to put into words my heartfelt appreciation of my ability of being invited to participate in this event. So a big thank you to Tom, but a heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you that are viewing this. It brings great joy to my life to share this information. And if you'd want to contact me, my email address is miles, M-I-L-E-S, 422 @yahoo.com. And I'll get back to you. I'm very busy, but I'll get back to you as quick as I can. That's my personal email address. I usually check my emails about every 2 or 3 days. And again, I just want to express my heartfelt appreciation and thanks to each and every one of you that are out there, and send my love and appreciation to you. Thank you.
Welcome back. That was an amazing, electrifying talk by Miles Blount. Very, very appreciative of him creating that and being here with us and transmitting that lovely information. It's like I keep saying, oh, I completely agree. Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. It's like, well, yeah, of course, we're playing on the same team, we're reading the same books. So yeah, there's a little bit of that agreement there. So we're very excited to be here. Let me now introduce Lilia Aguero. She is our co-host. She will be doing the Q&A, and I remind everybody, you're welcome to ask your questions in the Q&A on the Facebook feed. If you're watching the YouTube feed, you don't have that ability there, but you can ask questions in the Facebook feed. So a little introduction for Lilia, since we hadn't had a chance to introduce her yet. She's fairly new to the Seth material, but definitely not new to the mysteries and to this multidimensional metaphysical material that comes from other sources. So we definitely want to give her a warm welcome. She's also a very, very gifted tarot reader. She's very good at interpreting symbols of all kinds, archetypal symbols, whether they come through the tarot or the oracles or through other means. She's very gifted with deciphering the meanings of symbols in our lives. So that's a wonderful dimension that she brings into the conference as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and open it up for questions and answers. And so, yes, so let's go ahead and do that. I wrote down a few points from the talk that I just wholeheartedly just loved and appreciated. Maybe we can add that in later. So Lilia, if you have any questions that came in.
Yes, just to start again, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Tom. It is a joy to be working with everyone here today. Essentially, a first one here, a question from Karina Costa, and she is saying, okay, Miles, you said face your fears. Can you expand on that at all? And also, very much thanks you for an amazing presentation.
Thank you, Karina, and thank you very much for getting me into the first Seth conference I went to. You always hold a very, very warm place in my heart, so love you, dear. So I use a Tibetan technique. It's called feeding your demons. There was an American nun, Tibetan nun, very rare. And she developed this technique for taking what's inside of you and projecting it outside of you, and then making it come alive, anthropomorphizing it. So she's given it characteristics. And then you go through a process where you interact with your fears, and it's called feeding your demons. She's now in this country, in Colorado. She teaches that. They added it as a part of the university curriculum in Tibet, And so everybody now gets that training to deal with their fears. So on a personal note or a personal level, I do two other things. One is I pay attention to my dreams. Two, I pay attention to my feelings. And if either one of them are showing me I have a fear, then I ask the question, what would I have to believe in order to feel this way? And then I try and deal with that belief. I've also noticed then that if I start writing down a list of my empowering beliefs and compare them to the limiting belief that I have, it will, inside of me, supplant the older limiting belief if I just keep reviewing it. Hope that helps, Brenna.
That's really great. I that was one of the points I wrote down, is that core, for me, I've discovered that what would I have to believe is true about myself in this situation to feel this way, think this way, act this way, or be in this situation. That is just an amazing unlocker because it sheds light directly on the negative belief. And then you can work with it because it's conscious. You can't work with what's unconscious. So it's actually going into the fear. That's exactly the way I do it too. I just, it's just like, what is it, with curiosity, and just go right into it, and then you discover what it is. And then it's not so frightening anymore because it's right there in front of you. So thank you, Miles. Once again, I agree. But yeah, we're on the same.
Another thing, Reba and I do our spiritual practices in the morning, and I've developed the courage to say what's inside of me, just to get it out on the table.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll give her fair warning, like, I'm not happy with what I'm going to say here, but it's just what I'm feeling, and I want to get it out on the table. And then once we do, we can work on it together. We're a team.
Oh, absolutely. That vulnerability just opens things up for dialogue and investigation and curiosity. It's when we're afraid of things that we push them away. We just you know what I mean? Then it's got its power over us. But as soon as we face it, put it on the table, paradoxically enough, that's when it dissolves in the light of consciousness.
Well, it's a superpower, Tom.
Yes.
Vulnerability is the superpower because beneath that, we understand that we're eternal. We're not even vulnerable at all.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Vulnerability is strength. Paradoxically, there's a lot of paradox in all of this. So
isn't there ever?
Right. It's like you go directly into it in order to transform it. And it's like you go into this space of feeling completely vulnerable, and only there do you find your power. It's incredible, this process.
So we have a question from Chiron, or perhaps Chiron O'Keefe. And she would like to know whether, or rather in relationships, friendships, interactions, there sometimes feels like there's an overlap with their beliefs and our own beliefs. So how do we stay centered in action? How does one stay centered in action?
Well, this is a really profound question. So the first thing to keep in mind, and this is, it's mind-blowing, is that this world is here for us. And literally, the only thing we can learn from this world is about us. Because the energy flows through us and is projected out on this world. So what we see and what we're experiencing is ourselves. So what we're ultimately learning about is ourselves. Lila, can you repeat the question again? I got a little lost in that.
Yeah, no worries. Again, she's referring to when interacting.
Yeah.
And we're actually having exchanges within our relationships, our friendships, and so on. Or even perhaps in a heated argument with someone.
Sure.
So it feels like there's an overlap with their beliefs. It feels that way, whether it is or not, that we're kind of debating that. It feels like there's an overlap with their beliefs and our own beliefs. So how do we stay centered So it's
Well,
almost
first of
feeling as
all-
if there's a trigger happening of some sort,
Sure.
perhaps.
Well, it's a brilliant insight. We couldn't be having the interaction if what Chiron wasn't saying true, because unless we're a match, vibrational match for who they are, what they're talking about, that's the synchronicity, and that's what brings us enlightenment as we go through the interaction and keep owning it as our own.
Yes.
Interaction is about us, is about it's our own. Now, so I'm not going to be gentle here. When we turn away from anything, it ceases to exist. The existence of anything is only empowered by our focus and our energy. So we enliven it. Now, the people that are in our lives are God. They're infinite.
Hello, Moto.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can, So I got a little thrown there. I'll mute my phone. Sorry. So when we're interacting with others, multidimensionally, the interactions carry on either in another dimension or in non-physical reality, or both. So in our reality, they're following our script, reflecting us back to us. But they have their own bubble. Even Socrates recognized it. They have their own bubble, and they have their own reality, and they have their own multidimensionality. So every one of the interactions gets fully explored in all that is their soul. So you might go, well, what are they getting out of this interaction? Well, we don't know. It may turn out that everybody on the path is ahead of me, because I don't know what's going on in their bubbles. I don't know where they're at. But what I do know is I don't know. And the second part is that they have their own exploration of what's ever going on that's relevant for them.
So Miles, for these times, and I think this might be related to the question as well, and this may have to be our last question since we're running out of time here in our reality. What would you say is the number one skill to develop right now, to really hone, to really cultivate within ourselves in these so-called divisive times that we're experiencing in our country? What would you say is the number one skill to really develop within ourselves?
Oh, without a doubt. Reba and I, our lives have been dramatically changed because we've added this little piece to our morning practices, and it's now one of the first things we do. In fact, we actually have a ceremony called a cacao ceremony. And it's heart work. If you will do heart work for everybody, for yourself, start with yourself. Don't short yourself. Fill your tank up first, so you have the gas in it to give love and compassion and understanding to other people. But after that, take your focus, take your consciousness, and put it in loving without limits. You can love people, love governments, institutions, you can love your car, and of course, certainly people, animals, plants, even rocks. So, but the heart work has just been phenomenal in our lives. We only added it, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. Radically changed our reality. Now, let me add, so this is the mother lode right here. Every probable reality exists complete, every one. So when you turn your focus to what you want, every instant when reality is being recreated,
Yes.
quantum steps, you are moving to the reality that you want. And you don't even have to create it. It's already created. You just let go, let your energy flow, and you can take yourself to an amazing world. Amazing. Like Seth talked about the kids in Britain in World War II, how much fun they were having. And it's in the middle of a war. And I really related to that because as a kid, I loved to play the same way. So do heart work, and your heart work will carry you to the world that you want to be in.
Beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have reached the end of our time.
Great. Well, thank you, Miles, for being here. That's just lovely to have this interaction with you and your talk as well. Really, we send you our heart gratitude because we're just, we're just in this co-creative space, and we just love how we can all intersect in time and space and create this value fulfillment that we're creating here together. So thank you for being here.
Listen, I love you guys. I'm so thrilled to be a part of this and so honored, and I can't wait for the following speakers. What a treasure trove.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Welcome back. We really enjoyed that interaction with Miles Blount, and now we are ready to bring to you our next speaker, which is Chiron O'Keefe. She is the author of Bravely You, Bravely Me, Being You Without Apology, which is available on Amazon and Kindle. And she has, by her own description, been a poet, a singer, a songwriter, a lifelong dreamer, and a longtime Seth reader. So from her teen years, she's been developing this curiosity about the nature of reality, and she's been studying and incorporating Seth's concepts and philosophy for many decades as well. Now, she's been active in Seth groups, including Seth Network International, which some of you will remember, and various CompuServe forums from the 1990s. So she's also led group explorations into the nature of reality, into the nature of beliefs and dreams and probable realities. And she has lectured also on astrology and was published in American Astrologer. She's incorporated Seth's ideas in her sessions as an astrological counselor, and currently she is working on her second book. So she's continuing to explore and expand on Seth's concepts in a variety of ways in her life. You can find her on her Facebook, so facebook.com/Chiron O'Keefe, and that also is her website, which is chironokeefe.com. So you can definitely find her out there and enjoy her work as well. Today, she will be speaking to us on the nature of probable reality, and I'm really looking forward to this one because I love investigating this idea of probable realities. So without further ado, let's bring us to the stage Chiron O'Keefe.
Hello, I'm Chiron O'Keefe, the author of Bravely You, Bravely Me, Being You Without Apology. I'm also a poet, a musician, a dreamer, and a longtime Seth reader. Welcome to my presentation on the nature of probable reality. My first hint that there was more to linear reality than meets the mind came about when I was 4 years old, a few months after my father's death. I was playing happily with my 2 older siblings, splashing about in the lake, when I distinctly heard an adult voice muse, and that was the last time they would ever experience pure happiness as a family. Only thing was, splashing out there in the middle of the lake, there were no adults around. Even stranger, it sounded as if someone was flipping through a photo album, looking back and reminiscing about a life I had yet to lead. Like most kids, I took it in stride and didn't think much about it until my teens, when I would begin to ponder and search for answers in books, dreams, and the experiences of life. By age 14, I began studying books like Psycho-Cybernetics and Three Magic Words, which pointed out how beliefs form reality and how focus matters. I delved into Edgar Cayce, Carl Jung, and other books about reincarnation, dreams, astrology, tarot, and I began to perceive how interconnected everything seemed to be, all of which prepared me for the brilliant and evocative ideas in the Seth material. The books by Seth and Jane Roberts are read by millions of people around the world, and today we'll be exploring a favorite topic and one of Seth's most intriguing concepts, probabilities. Now, this topic is much greater than can be covered in one presentation. Seth spoke of this often, offering keen insights and helpful suggestions. For today's talk, we're going to the basics and adding some of my own personal experiences. What are probabilities and how do they come about? Are they real or just our imagination? What are the personal implications? How do we utilize them? How do they utilize us? Now let's begin. We live within a framework focused on making choices and then examining the results of those choices. The purpose being to learn to create responsibly through constructive choice. And toward that end, we live within a framework that allows us to select among any number of paths that will lead to greater understanding and value fulfillment. To understand how this factors into our personal life, we must first recognize that our current physical focus, the personality we call our own, is one facet of our whole self. It's the portion of our whole self that focuses in the physical framework, for it is here within linear time where we truly examine the results of our choices and learn the lessons that must be learned as we simultaneously seek out and explore value fulfillment. Yet, what happens with those paths that remain unchosen? I yearned at age 3 to be a ballerina. When I was 7, it seemed teaching 3rd grade was the ideal job. At 8, I fell in love with the Supremes and yearned to be a singer. When I was 10, I wanted to be a librarian. At 15, a rock star. As years rolled by, many probable paths sprang up. I loved psychology and incorporated that love into a study of astrology. Yet I know there's a Chiron whose passion for Carl Jung led her to focus on psychology instead. When I was 9, I caught my first play and shortly after auditioned to be in The Sound of Music. I was too short for one role, too tall for the next, but what of the me who got the part? Then there are relationships. For every breakup, there's a you who stayed with your former love. For every move to a new locale, there's a version of ourselves that stayed put. Every possible choice creates a new probability. Seth states that each mental act opens up a new dimension of actuality. In a manner of speaking, your slightest thought gives birth to worlds. What an evocative image. Our slightest thought gives birth to worlds. So every thought that arises continues on, every yearning fulfilled, every flicker of curiosity explored. Imagine your life as a vast map of all possible choices, dreams and speculations, paths not taken, all stretching out endlessly. You choose in your particular focus to follow one path, yet those unfollowed roads continue, and there's a probable you who indeed quested where you chose not to quest. Here's what Seth shared in Seth Speaks. Probabilities are an ever-present portion of your invisible psychological environment. You exist in the middle of the probable system of reality. It is not something apart from you. Now let's dig a little deeper. What are probabilities and how do they come about? Probabilities simply mean any path considered and rejected was indeed chosen by another probable you, creating an alternate reality. Each probable self has their own value fulfillment, their own hopes and dreams, their own lessons and growth. Probabilities emerge from choice. As a dream, you dreamt of various outcomes. As mentioned, my childhood was bursting with what-if scenarios. Based on books read and passions held, I wanted to be a famous singer, a nurse, librarian, elementary school teacher, psychologist, actress, comedy improv player, astrologer, children's book author, novelist, songwriter, and so on. My childhood was split between the Southern California mountains and the coast. However, my older sister was born in Hawaii, and Mom shared how Dad wanted to move back. So right there, I can pinpoint a probable me who was born or raised in Hawaii. My grandparents lived in New Jersey, and after Dad's death, Grandpa wanted us to move from the West Coast to the East, and we did stay with them for nearly a year. My childhood would have been dramatically different, and the me who sprang from that probability might seem quite alien to the me that I consciously became. For that matter, we were living in Spokane, Washington when Dad died. What about the Chiron who grew up there? Now, every potential relationship, even briefly considered, flowered in some probability. In some, you stayed with those with whom you parted in your personal experience. And ironically, this concept applies to the tiniest decisions, though obviously the momentous ones will have the most impact. But still, should I order this dish or that? Read this book or another? Watch TV or meditate? Plant daisies or tomatoes? Join a yoga class or learn to tap dance? Which also means that you may be drawn to someone because in another probability, the two of you are close. Yet in this probability, you may find them less than desirable or vice versa. What if you know someone in a different probability and their own probable self doesn't appeal to them? Let's say I meet someone here and now. I'll call her Sally. Now, Sally and I know each other in another probability, but the Sally that I know in this probability is vastly different from that other probable self. And who she is within that framework is so alien to her, she shrinks from the association. Then she meets me. We feel an instant connection, but that connection is based on the probable self she finds less than desirable. My presence reminds her of that other self, and so she feels simultaneously drawn to and repelled by me for no obvious reason. Likewise, I would perceive the connection on an inner level and would similarly feel a combination of attraction and repulsion. We both feel an inclination to not be those other probable selves, while also feeling a strong connection, even loyalty, that we can't consciously comprehend, much less explain. Truly a fascinating thought, which hints how intuition might be linked to our probable connections. Now, are probabilities real? Beyond the physical musings, even some quantum physicists are leaning more firmly towards embracing this as factual reality. Since the 1950s, physicists like Hugh Everett have been postulating what has come to be called the many worlds theory. Simply put, within quantum physics, all probabilities that can exist do exist. While there is significant resistance to this idea for decades, many contemporary physicists have come to embrace, if not outright accept, this concept as valid, particularly in light of no contradiction being found in their mathematics. So, what are the personal implications? The self I call me has a multitude of probabilities fanning out in all directions. The more curious we are, the wider the scope of probabilities. We can and do weave in and out of those probabilities all the time, usually without ever noticing. A casual idea entertained as a child spawns a probability, and that probability lives on, thriving in his or her own reality. In fact, as Seth pointed out, each probable self considers themselves the real you, and to them, you would be the probable self. Through the inner senses, all of you are aware of your part in the Gestalt. He emphasizes this in the nature of personal reality. To paraphrase, there are no boundaries. There are literally many other probable yous. You can draw on their abilities as they will draw upon yours, for you are all intimately connected. You must realize that you are indeed a probable you. Now let's savor that thought. We are probabilities. They are just as real as we are. We tap into a probable self and find what would appear to be natural talents, picking up new skills more easily. And as mentioned earlier, we meet someone new and feel an instant rapport. Now, in my teens, when I met someone who felt familiar, I'd say, We probably knew each other in another life, only half joking. Yet even more intriguing is to realize we connect with people from another probability all the time. So our intuition guides us with a positive nudge or a whisper of warning based on relationships that are occurring simultaneously with this one. Also, from the perspective of healing, there's great emotional value in recognizing we are indeed following the path untaken. By exploring these alternate realities, the one where we did indeed go on to seek out another career, or where we invested a year to travel through Italy, or chose to stay with a lover, we could release regret, just as we could tap into an immense, dazzling range of abilities, interests, and strengths. We also exponentially increase our awareness and our potential. Now, what's the difference between a probability and this life I call my own? The only real difference is that you have chosen a portion of your experience to identify as your life. Your probable selves experience the rest. Seth said that each event in our life was once probable. We chose what will become physically materialized. Now, I mentioned earlier I was just beginning to study ballet at the age of 3, rather hard for a young one to grasp. But I do remember being fascinated and loving it. After Dad died, dance classes came to an abrupt halt, but I remember 5 years later still playfully doing the initial moves. For years, whenever I went out dancing, people would ask where I studied or if I was a professional. Now, I suspect in another incarnation, which is really just a probability set in time, I was trained, and so the probability in this life was strengthened. Yet it's also possible that the probability in this life influenced another incarnation. Perhaps what people actually tuned into was not skill, but the other probability peeking in. It's easy, though, to see how the probable me who became a dancer had strengths and abilities I can tap into. How do we utilize probabilities, and how do they utilize us? Probabilities are a source of untapped potential, reservoirs of knowledge, and experience not consciously evident. Now, any probability where you explore an interest contains potential for easy access to that corresponding skill. So let's take a moment and think about this. If you yearn to be an artist, a surgeon, an arborist, or a scientist, if you dreamt of being an astronaut, sculptor, firefighter, world traveler, or best-selling author, there is a you who explored that path, which can mean easy access, a hidden talent that comes naturally. It means certain subjects are more easily understood as you tap into that probable you. Similarly, your probable selves may find ease and greater success in areas where you have embraced your own passion. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I explain some of my personal experiences within dreams. Now, another intriguing factor is our intuition. Seth points out that an intuitional nudge can arrive from a probable future self who took a path you're better off avoiding, or who had great success with a move you're pondering, or even deeply regrets a missed opportunity. Along the same lines is how probable selves utilize us. Now let's consider again how to your younger self, you are the future probability. There's a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, 12-year-old, teenage self. Every single moment point is a probability in motion. Now, think of this spacious present as a glittering jewel with infinite facets reflecting every unique probability. You flip to one reflection and it's the you who decided to move. Flip again and it's the you who decided to take a job you ultimately passed on. Just as your future probable selves can guide, support, and encourage you, so you can be a guide for probable selves that are even now experiencing fresh new moments in your past. In that sense, you're like an oversoul to every probable self that you can imagine. You can guide your younger self, urge her to avoid a pitfall, or encourage him to turn left instead of right. There's a very popular axiom that suggests you wouldn't want to change the past because then you wouldn't be who you are today. Yet when we incorporate the idea of probabilities, we expand into endless probable pasts and probable futures. A future probable me may well advise me to take a different road, may even create a probable path for me to travel on, knowing it will not affect the integrity of her self-awareness at all. In other words, the wisdom you gather, the insights you garner, the overall understanding achieved will not vanish. In fact, can't vanish, as your whole self incorporates every probability quite neatly into the unique, multi-dimensional self that you are. Referring back to my rock and roll persona now, after decades of playing guitar, I've become somewhat skilled. Yet I have no real inclination to jump on stage. However, it tickles me to consider that there may be a probable me emerging in a fresh past who now has the natural talent my current skill level provides. So rather than thinking, as I used to in my teens, skills garnered may serve me in my next life, I now recognize with glee and satisfaction that I am the future self to my younger selves. Any skill I acquire provides a springboard for her. Likewise, any skill she acquires can be a springboard for me. How cool is that? So, my childhood was challenging, which I explored in my self-help memoir. There were heartbreaks, challenges, loss, missed opportunities, and it's a safe bet that many have experienced similar heartbreaks, challenges, gut-wrenching loss, and missed opportunities. There's the overture from a potential friend ignored out of fear, or the poor choice of lovers that left us feeling crushed and demoralized. Many of us harbor regrets that we chose not to invest time or energy in a path that ignited our souls. Now, first, once again, we need to remember that whatever wisdom garnered is ours to keep, which means a younger version of you doesn't need to struggle or suffer, as she can tap into the understanding you have gained. Your wisdom and awareness is available to all younger versions of you, just as the wisdom and awareness of future you can be tapped in by you here in the present. Your whole self is composed of all facets of being. All probabilities and incarnations are a source of educational experience. If you learn a lesson in a particular incarnation, you needn't repeat that lesson, unless, of course, you're a very slow learner, and sometimes we all qualify. But young Chiron doesn't need to endure horrific circumstances so she can learn, because she can tap into what I've already learned. We're stronger together, and recognizing that opens the door to incorporating the wisdom, skills, insight, and perspective from each and every probability. Seth said, all probable worlds exist now. All probable variations on the most minute aspect in any reality exists now. You weave it out of probabilities, constantly picking and choosing as you go along. The cells within your body do the same. Now, Seth encourages us to explore and experiment with probabilities, suggesting we write down our known physical and mental abilities, developed or not, and all inclinations, no matter how remote. These represent the various probable characteristics. Out of these attributes, you chose what you now consider to be your hard-bed reality. An easy way to begin is to ponder your own paths not taken, and towards that end, imagination is our closest route to framework 2. Another exercise for exploring probable realities is to focus in an alpha state, allowing your mind to wander as you trace alternative paths. Select a photograph, a scene from the past, and experience it imaginatively with the idea of possible offshoots. As you do this, a portion of the scene may become fuzzy, gray, or shadowy. That's a clue of an intersection point where the past served as an offshoot into a series of probabilities. Or you yourself may feel unsubstantial, ghostly, as you sense the divergence of paths. Dialogue may change, or actions may seem vastly different, which is a hint you're glimpsing probable variations. The subjective feeling is the soundest indicator. What's vital to remember is that there may be a learning curve with this and other exercises. Choosing a path where pertinent choice was involved will often yield more obvious results. Focus on the crossroads and then vividly imagine taking a deliberate turn onto the road not taken. He says, imagination may bring you a clear picture, for example, that may then become fuzzy, and in that case, the blurred quality would be your hint of probable action. Now, this exercise can open up doorways of possibility. Approach this with a playful, easygoing attitude. As simplistic as it may sound, I highly recommend seeing this as a creative exercise, as if you were making up a story. The more relaxed you are, the easier it becomes. Seth goes on to say, you will know, for instance, when the remembered event and imagination intersect with another probability. Whether or not you have any great success, the exercise will begin a neurological reorientation that will be most important if you hope to glimpse realities that are outside of your present neurologically accepted sense reality. A neurological reorientation. Think about that. Now, we tend to be somewhat dismissive about imagination these days. It's neatly relegated into what we call creativity, and we're very stiff and formal about what it is not. So there is supposedly real and not real. Now, obviously, we stick dreams into the second category, along with imagination, visualization, speculation, and daydreams, which may be seen as the misfit children that don't actually belong in polite society. Yet what Seth states here is that we actively change our neurological structure. And of course, we now have scientific studies that utilize brain scans to definitively prove that creative and meditative pursuits actually do change our brains. So, as Seth puts it, this exercise is a mental and biological doorway that can expand both your concepts of yourself and reality. What happens with these exercises can be profound. Even if you don't perceive obvious and immediate results, you may find that whenever a new decision arises, you can more easily tune in to the results of the opposite choice. The more you explore and play around with probabilities, the wider your inner perception stretches. You may begin experiencing dreams from a different probability. We deal with future probabilities within dreams regularly. In dreams, we explore various solutions to a problem, and the choice made there becomes our reality. He reminds us that on an unconscious level, you are aware of your probable selves and they of you. You may think that these are fantasy, but instead you're perceiving a legitimate picture of events that did occur within another system of probabilities. Now let me tell you, tuning into a probable reality in the dream state is pretty exciting. It may also be unnerving because just like with incarnations in other time frames, it's you but not you. The independent nature of probabilities is unquestionable. We can, however, influence, guide, counsel, and encourage our probable selves. They benefit from us, and we benefit from them. Seth points out when you exercise your right arm, the left arm benefits. When you develop abilities in one system to some extent, they are easier to develop in another. Now, we encounter probable selves in dreams without even realizing it all the time, viewing them as oddly familiar strangers and perceiving them as different people, even celebrities who may appeal to us or not. We may feel we recognize them in ways we can't quite explain, as they would appear as shadow aspects who psychologically represent unacknowledged aspects of our being. Now, when we drop into a probable life where we are the other, it's doubly fascinating, and again, may appeal or not. I've dropped into probable lives that fascinate and others that repel. For me, there was one probability in a dream who was less than appealing, to put it mildly. She moved up to where I now live, a decade and a half before we did. Now, when I dropped into this probability, I was her, for better or for worse. She's involved in fundraising and quite successful. So where could that probable path have begun? Well, my husband and I were considering a move up here when we were first together over 2 decades ago, and the dreams of her began shortly after we did move up here in 2015. Interesting side note, George found a map used when looking for homes way back when. He circled a home within a few blocks of the one where we now live. Yet as fascinating as the dream was, that particular probability was one I did not find engaging or pleasant. She struck me as harsh and strident, although also immensely powerful and charismatic. And it was clear, based on interactions with others within the dream, that she was skilled at organizing fundraisers. Now, I happened to drop into the dream right before an event began, the first dream, as she was ticking off all the particulars that needed to be in place. I could tell she was successful and well liked by her peers. Yet we were so different that if I met her in the store, I probably wouldn't feel any kinship. And I will say that while I'm glad she thrives in that probability, I recognize that who she chooses to be doesn't appeal to me. Now, it's obvious her success led to wealth beyond my current comprehension. The crossroad appears to be that she moved up north, while the probability that I consider my official reality had us moving to Southern Oregon instead. I have no idea of the period before I tapped into the probability. When I'm dreaming, whether of a probable me or another incarnation, I only tune into what the person is thinking or feeling in that moment. So I don't know how she became successful or how their material abundance came about. Anyway, what really struck me in the dream is that she was unpleasant. In fact, she struck me as downright repellent. I'm not going to mince words. She was controlling, aggressive, intense, clearly used to getting exactly what she wants. And her lifestyle was beyond luxurious. This dream prompted a rather fascinating conversation with my own inner source, where he emphasized a distinction in the understanding of reality creation. He said, when you're focusing on a change in circumstance, you're rarely consciously creating a reality, as all probabilities exist now. What you do is align yourself with the probability in motion. Perceiving this distinction serves two purposes. One, emotionally, it is less daunting to recognize that you're not slinging bricks and painstakingly piecing together a reality that you can barely comprehend. Two, you then can recognize that each probability springs out of your current beliefs and value fulfillment. This is the crux of why you have chosen your current probability. Okay, to sum up, I align myself with the current probability because I believe it serves me. Understanding why and how it serves me is the key to any changes I want to focus on. Now, when I peeked into the consciousness of that other probability, who certainly has wealth anyone would envy, I perceived a whole slew of qualities I absolutely wouldn't want to embrace. Now, does this mean I couldn't handle wealth or that I would become like her? No, not at all. It does show me that my current focus has indeed served me, whether consciously or unconsciously. Bottom line, I like me. I like who I chose to become. Frankly, I didn't like her much at all. She traveled down a road untaken, and yet, while I wouldn't want to hang out with her, I did find her fascinating. Her obvious command of her reality, her assumption of power and control was overwhelming, and I'll admit, quite impressive. Now, this was a new experience for me to have several dreams of a current probable self. And what made it more incredible was that when I mentioned the dreams to my husband, it turned out he was similarly dreaming of a probable reality where we already lived up north. When I talked about her, he knew exactly who she was too. Now, I wanted further clarification from my inner source on this, so I had a sci-time session to dig a little deeper. Now, first, we know all probabilities exist simultaneously, but clearly the one in my dream didn't feel like a good fit at all. If I had to choose between being rich in her and not rich in me, I would certainly choose me. Is it an either-or situation? Now, I could almost feel him smile as words poured into my head. What this means is that whether you casually indulge in a daydream, or focus with vivid intensity, you are constantly creating probabilities. Imagine if each probability were a lighthouse. Any self can spot it, can be drawn to it, and travel towards an alignment. There are obstacles which are quite simply your own beliefs and values. The more powerful the probability, the more selves are drawn to the light it emits. You can indeed create a probability and infuse it with energy and align yourself with it. This feels like a rather daunting task for many, and the easiest transitions are those probabilities with a similar feel. It would be easier for you to slip in a probability of your conscious choosing because your personality would find it comfortable and homey. It would feel like you. A drastic change would not. Now, many who acquire wealth overnight then feel disconcerted, frightened, and even disoriented, he said. They see the lighthouse and fear crashing against the cliffs. The darkness of the unknown seas now seems threatening, with shadowy predators waiting to attack. Stripped of all that is familiar, they often quite deliberately crash, even while consciously assuring themselves that that is not what they want. Always the question becomes, why did you choose this probability? What did you hope to gain? How does it serve you? And perhaps even more importantly, if you left this probability, what would you lose? Now, my inner source talked to me about that other probability and pointed out that my perception of her was based on my own judgments, that she is actually well-loved and quite charming and extremely generous, involved in various groups that focus on helping others. From her perspective, my own past neediness and early fearful nature would be equally repugnant. Okay, I can see that. He pointed out that it's this way anytime we encounter anyone who displays values, ideals, or beliefs that we're currently working on. We're either drawn to or repulsed by the perceived reflection. So she represented my own judgments, and by examining that, I could then explore my beliefs in that area. As I did that, dug in, sorted through beliefs, shifted and rearranged, and came to a place where I could embrace my own leadership abilities, my own internal power, the dream stopped. I suspect that as I evolved and transformed, she benefited from my own awareness. I learned from her and released the judgments and fears that held me back. I have no doubt that my own strength and compassion has rippled out and helped shape her as well. My inner source, whom I've nicknamed Sam, reminded me that any time we shift probabilities, we may catch glimpses of others that connect in some fashion to current changes. He suggested I imagine one person trotting through the snow and another then finding it easier to walk in those footsteps until enough people carve a path that is easily spotted by one and all. He mentioned something I found very intriguing, that when we specifically heal parts of our past by creating alternate probabilities, we clear the way and make it that much easier for others to align with a particular probable choice. I liked that. For example, right before the Psi Time exercise that I mentioned, I began packing up Halloween decorations scattered throughout the house. Now, at one point, I mentioned to my husband how my mom never wanted to decorate or celebrate holidays, how as the years went by, she became even more disinterested in celebrating or even being a family. Okay, so that's one of my boxes of beliefs that I had. Sam likened a new probability to a specific location in one's garage. There are all these boxes in the way, and you have to carve a path through those boxes. So every time you clear out a box or heal a past event by creating an alternate event, you declutter your path. Fascinating thought. Now, how many probable selves does it change? How many probable selves does it take to change a light bulb? Well, I guess it depends on which box the light bulb is in. Now, another intriguing glimpse into probable realities came in a dream of me who stayed with my first husband. In my early 20s, I fell in love and got married. We didn't have much in common except our fondness for each other. He was into rock climbing, hiking, skiing, while my passion was music, philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, and acting. So though we loved each other enough to marry, we only stayed together for 5 years. We simply didn't share enough commonality to form a lifelong bond. However, just as there was a me who left, there was also a me who stayed. Now, although I'm not particularly athletic in this probability, there has always been some urges within. As a kid, I loved basketball and could easily spend an hour shooting hoops. During my childhood years in the mountains, I regularly walked everywhere and hiked the hills with my beloved childhood pets. I adored swimming and would spend hours body surfing when we lived near the coast. And I remember at age 7 riding a skateboard around and becoming rather good at it. So there I am in a dream, and I could feel that it was me, but not the me that I experienced in this probability. Now, I wish I could tell you how I knew that, but it was instinctual rather than intellectual. I simply knew. Now, unlike the dream with the fundraiser, this was me jumping into someone else's reality in the sense that I maintained memory of this conscious life while in her body. If any of you remember the old show Quantum Leap, this dream was like that. Now, when it dawned on me that I was me but not me, and that I was somewhat aware, I became very curious. So with growing excitement, I wandered through her apartment, picking up framed photographs, but no one looked familiar. I knew, though, that this me had stayed with my first husband. I could feel that she leaned towards his interest, and I have to say that my incredibly fit body was a wonder. I even bent down and lightly slapped my thigh, astonished at how toned she was. Curious, I then wandered into the closet to see what she wore. Now, at the time of this dream, the me in my particular probability, that is, in my waking life, was very much into my singer-songwriter phase, and so I dressed like a colorful hippie artist. Some of you may have seen earlier photos of me on my website and my Facebook page. So, as I eagerly flipped through her wardrobe, I was astonished and even disappointed at how staid and uniform her clothes were. And unlike my own, her whole closet was color coordinated and nearly pristine. Interestingly enough, quite a few years later, when I moved to the Portland area, as I arranged the clothes in my closet, I found myself automatically organizing them by color. Now, what that dream revealed to me, though, is how vibrant and real probabilities are. She lived and thrived in a probability that I had stepped away from. I knew she lived in Huntington Beach. In my probability, my husband and I moved from there to Tahoe and then parted a couple of years later. Did they move back or did they never leave? One thing I could tune into, and that was simply how she felt happy, content in her life and in her marriage. Now, based on my peek into her psyche, she was fulfilled and well-adjusted. I also knew that my casual interest in skateboarding as a child had reignited, and she loved to skateboard. And I highly suspect that her focus on physical activity and athletics enhances my life. And as I continually tap into her vigor, her joy also sustains me. Now, another truly intriguing dream probability is where I met another version of my sister. Now, our fractured early years meant that in this probability, the three of us children emerged as somewhat broken misfits, and we all chose paths to explore based on the fragmentation and chaos of our earliest years. Yet, what of the probability where we managed to have a stable home life? A childhood that would have led to a fairly ordinary yet blissfully normal exploration of high school and college, followed by steady career paths, would have spawned completely different versions of ourselves. The sister I encountered in this other probability had little resemblance to the one I vividly knew. This one had indeed graduated high school and college, choosing to study music, focused on being a composer and a musician specializing in the classical field. Now, when my sister was in her late teens, she taught herself guitar and began composing songs. A few years later, she played me an astonishingly good concerto that she'd written on piano. She thrived on the attention of performance, but for her, in this probability, music was a brilliant gift, but not a path she intended to pursue. It simply wasn't a primary value fulfillment. The probable version I met, however, apparently was where that specific desire was explored. The talent she had in this life was likely a result of that offshoot apparently dedicating her life to music. Ironically, I remember telling my mom about the concerto my sister had written, and she was surprised, telling me that we had all received piano lessons as children, lasting only a couple of years after Dad died. But apparently, according to the teacher, my sister had not shown any natural talent. So perhaps that motivated her to buckle down and push herself to achieve a skill in that probability, similarly to how I pushed myself to learn guitar in this one. Did the skill acquired in another probability lead to a natural gift in this one? Now, the probable dream that is nearest and dearest to my heart is one many here will love. In the early 90s, I met a probable Jane who didn't die at the age of 55. One thing that cracks me up about the me in dreams is my tendency to blurt things out. So in this dream, I was so excited and then blurted out that she died in my probability. She seemed intrigued and not at all put off by that, so I continued on, once again blurting out how she was super skinny in that other probability. Not the most smooth comment. In my dream, Jane was comfortably fleshed, relaxed, and quite happy. When I told her about skinny Jane, she laughed. Thank goodness. And Rob chuckled fondly and poked her with his elbow. It seemed like there was a private joke there between them. Now, I woke too soon, of course, but I was so glad to have the opportunity to meet her. Now, these dreams revealed how probable selves spring out of yearnings and curiosity. It's pretty obvious I tap into the vigor of my athletic probable paths. The psychologist me not only motivates me to examine behavior both for myself and others, and it also filters all observations through a psychological lens. The probable me who became a dancer allows me at times to tap into an exuberance and fluidity that's quite delightful. All these probabilities impact me, and I no doubt I have a profound and powerful influence on them. As we tap into other probabilities, we also interweave with probabilities others have chosen. Some of you might remember a scene in Conversations with Seth by Susan Watkins, where a class member strolled in and several people felt a jolt because they barely recognized him. He felt different. What had changed? Was he thinner? Was it his lack of mustache? Maybe, but it felt like more. Seth popped in to announce that this was a new probable self. Here's a snippet. Now, Seth went on, in my books I have said that often when this occurs, people will say, you seem almost but not quite like a different person, or there's something different about you and you have changed in a way I cannot explain. But the theme is picked up at once. Seth went on to explain that it had nothing to do with physical events, but with growth, directions of vitality and energy. Now, in my own life, I've definitely noted several major probable shifts along with infinite smaller shifts. Looking at photos of myself in years past, there's little similarity between some versions. It's always an odd sensation to observe and consider the yester me and who I now know myself to be. Yet it's even more astonishing when we can actually perceive somebody that we know and love dearly shifting dramatically into another probable self. A few years back, I ran into an old friend at the supermarket. I knew instantly he was a new probable self. He looked shorter somehow and more substantial, which seemed to suit him. It was odd. He was only 5'11", but always stooped as if he was much taller. And in truth, he always did seem much taller. I could feel distinctly how the energy had changed within him. We chatted a bit and hugged, but there was no relationship between he and I. Although he shared my friend's memories, I could sense that he was embracing this new probability, which no doubt had memories of its own. The friend I'd known for years wasn't the man standing there. It's a strange realization. We feel this grief when people die without realizing. The friends and relatives slip away and maybe reappear quietly with little notice. The night before, I'd had a dream where he and I had connected, and he was super sad and commented how he didn't want to lose our friendship. Now, after running into him at the supermarket, I realized that this was the former probable self that I'd actually seen within a dream. Another time, even more notable, was when a friend stopped by to visit. We went out to my back deck to chat. Now, this is someone I know exceptionally well, and it was stunningly obvious that he was a new probable self. How I knew that is harder to describe. He didn't look different, but his psychic signature had vividly changed. I could feel that strongly. And as we talked, he began telling me about a woman he'd recently met and become involved with. He hadn't enjoyed a long-term relationship for years, and I remembered now that a few months ago he'd made a public post on Facebook about his deep realizations of wrongs done in a past relationship, and he wanted to publicly own that and resolve to be different moving forward. Clearly, that was when this new probability was born. This was a new probable self I was encountering, now ready for a relationship. Now, with both of these occurrences, the people I knew felt dramatically different, very much as was described in conversations with Seth. We all tap into these alternate paths, yet some more consciously or more vigorously than others. And as we explored, we can utilize these carefully developed skills that in our own probability may appear as a natural talent. So this leads to, can we consciously assist those other probabilities, and in so doing, assist ourselves? Now, to borrow words coined by Stevie Wonder, there's a yester-me, a yester-you, still thriving in yesterday. This is something we don't often consider, but oh, what a delightful thought. You see, we're so self-centric. We don't often contemplate how we help our probable selves. And as we strengthen them, they in turn strengthen us. Now think of every past moment as its own individual self. Sit with that for just a moment. The you at age 3, 7, 14, 21, and so on, all probable selves who are independent of the you who is currently listening to me speak. In fact, you have no control over their decisions, and they could decide to go on a completely different route with unique choices. In fact, each probable you has her own future to explore, which could include future incarnations. It's dazzling to consider just how many lives we're living, how many lives, probabilities, and incarnations that spring from a singular focus. Now, probabilities are also not dependent on the apparent forward motion of linear time. In other words, we can and do create probable pasts as surely as we create probable futures. As Seth put it, you only experienced one probable past. By changing this past in your mind, now in your present, you can change not only its nature, but its effect, and not only upon yourself, but upon others. Seth made an intriguing comment that spelled out his connection to Jane, and that's when we learned he's an aspect of Jane, and so could be called a future Jane who influenced his own past. He said, Rupert's life as he knows it is not in my memory, because I did different things when I was Rupert, and he is not bound by that reality that was mine. I have memories of being Rupert, but the Rupert I was is not the Rupert that Rupert is in his reality. So Jane, or Rupert, made different choices than Seth did when he was Rupert. Clearly then, probabilities we spawn with our wishes, our hopes, yearnings, or regrets have their own free will. We can't control them, but we do have the power to influence. In that sense, again, we can be the acting oversoul of our probable selves. Imagine yourself at the age of 8 during a particularly challenging time. You can focus vividly on whispering encouragement or even suggesting an alternate decision. You can become the voice, the intuition that guides you today. Now here's a fun way to explore becoming that voice of guidance. Whenever you misplace something, it is the future you who locates the object. So an entertaining practice is that when you find the missing item, to pause, take a moment to imagine the moment you lost it, and then imagine whispering in your ear exactly where it can be found. you could follow through by visualizing yourself hearing the words and then striding over to pick up the object, even adding, "Thank you, future self." We could also utilize probabilities consciously and quite deliberately by purposely creating alternate past realities. Changing the past is actually carving new pathways for your younger self to follow. I've done this frequently and have always found it to be useful, often cathartic, and always energizing. First off, let's pause. Imagine your life is a story, one you are reading in a favorite book that your soul is writing. And there are many alternate chapters, infinite alternate endings and beginnings. If you were to write that story, how would it go? Now, the first time I explored this consciously, writing my own past, I decided to author an alternate pathway beginning from the earliest years of my life. I reasoned out that if probabilities happen unconsciously, bursting out of decisions I barely remember, so could they be produced consciously and deliberately. Why not take this on from the perspective of an artist? Obviously, this would be an ambitious project, a complete rewrite of my consciously remembered life. Rather than being held back by, "but this couldn't happen because," or striving to fit the new probable history into a pattern that aligned with my current life, I gave myself free rein. Now, with this first foray into creating my own probable past, I went back and added alternative decisions and circumstances. It was harder for me that first time to visualize a reality where my father had lived. So instead, for my first experimental rewrite, I simply focused on a reality where another probable mom made wiser choices, and that spawned a vividly different childhood for me, which in turn meant that I then made more constructive choices. I invested an entire weekend to this ambitious probability project, wandering around in a daze, adding subplots and characters, and I did not hold back. I did not at any point tell myself that this was not possible or logical. I just went for it. And it was so empowering to visualize myself being raised to be confident and strong, to visualize myself attempting and mastering goals, to imagine bypassing destructive choices and embracing constructive opportunities at every turn. Now, let me tell you, this experiment surpassed all expectations. I actually felt high for a week afterwards, buzzing with positive energy, figuratively walking on air. It had such an impact on me, more than I could have ever imagined. I could actually feel how it changed me. I truly believe every cell of our bodies is probable as well, and such a concentrated focus creates a new cellular identity. I became a new me. Now, as time goes on, I continue to explore alternate paths in my past, making different choices, elaborately dreaming up extraordinary probable histories, and sometimes it's obvious how it's impacting me and sometimes not. Yet even when I can't perceive an influence, it's still one of the most entertaining and satisfying creative endeavors I've ever enjoyed. And one thing stunningly obvious, I can actually perceive on an inner level how I'm stretching, becoming more than me. I'm expanding internally, and I can feel my multidimensionality. Now, there's theoretical and practical. There's inner senses and concrete outer events. So towards that end, I also note that the changing situations that sprang from those experiments. In that first probability project, I imagined getting a typewriter and beginning to write as a teen. In real life, I soon began writing in earnest, exploring fiction for fun and eventually creating a motivational blog, which in turn would lead to me writing my first book. I imagined a younger sister, and years later would indeed meet a woman who feels so close to me. We often play around with imagining growing up as sisters. Seth also points out that probabilities extend in all directions. There's a probability where I was an only child, or the oldest rather than the youngest. There's a probability where my mom married a different man than my father. Even perhaps a probability where a woman I adore and call my sister is actually my sister, because we chose different parents so we could grow up together. Even if I didn't know that probable paths exist. I can still state quite confidently that this exercise is one of the most powerful emotional projects you can explore. However, I do believe it's vital to recognize what Seth taught us, that those probable realities are as real and substantial as the reality we call our own, and they can influence, strengthen, and provide exquisite value fulfillment. One of my favorite reminders from Seth states, to the extent that you are open and receptive, you can benefit greatly by the various experiences of your probable selves and gain from their knowledge and abilities. Quite spontaneously, you often do this in the dream state, and often what seems to you to be an inspiration is a thought experience but not actualized on the part of another self. You tune in and actualize it instead. So how many probabilities exist within our lives? How many breaths do we take in a day? When I was a kid, there was this cool game. We'd take a pad of paper and draw a series of pictures, each one slightly changed so the character moved. Now, I was too young to realize we were imitating the actual process of animators as they brought those Disney classics to life. I just knew it was a cool, fascinating bit of magic to watch characters move quickly or slowly as we slipped through the pages. What I now realize, thanks to Seth, is that each one of those individual pictures is its own probability. Instead of flipping rapidly, I can take each of those still life drawings and acknowledge it as a probability with her own choices, desires, goals, and lessons to learn. I can now recognize that we are multidimensional beings with endless probabilities. And yet, rather than feeling overwhelmed or even insignificant, the realization is that we are greater than we can imagine. In that sense, I am we, and all of my probable selves seek fulfillment. And as I grow, I strengthen and enhance their value fulfillment as they do for me. Even better, I can heal. I can encourage my younger probabilities, and as they move forward into their futures, I can guide them and provide wisdom and love. Their exuberance and delight can fuel my passion and also guide me towards the most fulfilling choices to make. Now, I'd like to leave you with a potent reminder from Seth. The present is the point of power. All of your physical, mental, and spiritual abilities are focused together in this brilliant concentration of present experience. You are not at the mercy of the past unless you believe you are. If you fully comprehend your power in the present, you will realize that action at this point also alters the past, its beliefs, and your reactions. It is here in the spacious present that we operate. The past memories we experience reflect our current beliefs, and by changing those beliefs, we can change our past, either directly with conscious exercises or indirectly as a result of the ripple effect from the changing beliefs. We can actively imagine probabilities, and in so doing, we create worlds. We align ourselves with those probabilities that match up with our beliefs and our focus. Our probabilities are not stagnant moments frozen in time, but living, breathing aspects of ourself, aspects that can enrich our current experience and who can benefit greatly from our own deliberate focus. We are learning to be conscious creators, and perhaps our most magnificent and poignant creation is our many aspects of self. Which me? Which you? Which world? Thank you so much for joining my probable presentation on probabilities. There's so much to be found regarding this concept woven into Seth's books. Clearly, he loved it as much as I do. Now, as you continue to explore this fascinating topic, I also recommend making a regular practice of sending love and support to your various probabilities. Imagine it as a wave of energy emanating from you in all directions. And likewise, imagine them sending energy back to you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you enjoy my speculations, please follow my author page on Facebook for regular postings. You can also find out more information about me and my book on my website at www.chironokeefe.com. Hope to see you there. Thank you.
So, hi, I'm Paul, and what does the Seth material mean to me? I'll just say two things very briefly about the Seth material. One is really believing that this reality that I'm living right now, my physical reality, is not the only reality. In other words, the multidimensional self has been very powerful for me. And also the idea of reincarnation, which of course is connected with that, has been very powerful for me in keeping me from worrying about, death, So those two things were the things that really meant the most to me. All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Myrna. I'm from the Oakland Bay area in California. And I started reading about Seth probably in the 1970s. My background, I'll make it very short, was growing up in a Catholic religion, and I just couldn't understand it. And I knew there's something better for me. And I found Seth, and I'm not exactly sure how I did it. But to make this short, what's very important to me is one, which I'll read something to you, is trust, and the importance of trust, which Seth's always said, you have to trust your inner self. And I suggest you start now. I have always liked Seth because he had a little edge to him. And the other very important thing to me, which I'm really pursuing, is emotional intensity with expectation and how important that is. And I'm just going to read one thing to you when it means something to me. And this is from the magical approach. You may not consider trust an attribute connected with reasoning, but it is indeed, for it represents the creature's innate understanding of the support with which it has been gifted. And that's hope and trust for me, and it means something to me.
I'm Catherine, and I am in Arizona. I've been reading Seth since 1976, when my sister, who will speak pretty soon, Susan, gave me Seth Speaks. And it's impacted my life in many, many ways, but two of the biggest things I can think of is enabled me to have a sense of spirituality after I had become quite disenchanted with Christianity, and which I was raised, and I couldn't understand Christianity even though I tried. And when I found Seth, it really helped me to find that spiritual side of myself. The other thing that I think it has affected me in my life is it has really made me take responsibility for my own life. And it has made me think about my choices and be aware of the choices that I am making. But mainly having that sense of responsibility for everything that happens to me. I've loved every minute of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary from London, England, across the pond. I found the Seth books totally life-changing for me. I remember the day that I actually bumped into Seth. It was in 1974. And I think the two biggest things that really impacted me was the statement that you create your own reality by what you think about, what you believe in. And I remember arguing with those concepts for over a year before it went, you've got to take responsibility. And the freedom that gave me was wonderful. And the second thing that really came into me was when I read that he talked about the universe is bending towards you, that we're of good intent. I always knew we were good rather than bad, but that validation that we're basically goodness was very freeing for me. So that's me.
I'm Mike. I always wanted to live in California. I grew up on the East Coast. I've lived in California since 1978. I was in New York before that and in Pennsylvania, and I moved to Sacramento in 2004. Okay, so how did I get to Seth? I'll get to that. I'm just going to say right now that Seth, more than anybody else, has helped me to accept myself completely as I am. And Seth also reminds me of the great joy and vitality of my being. Whenever I hear those words or read them, I am aware that I'm a unique, special, and joyous portion of all that is, and that I am a wonderful contribution to the human race, whether I'm gay, straight, bisexual, whether I'm black, white, Asian, Native American, or whatever. So it's really helped me to accept myself and to accept that I do create my own reality. Up until Seth, I was blaming other things for my problems. I grew up in a pretty strict religious, it was not Catholic, it was Episcopal. And the first thing I did to reject Christianity was hearing somebody tell me that animals, that humans have souls and animals don't. But those blessed animals, of course they have souls. Of course they have souls. We all have souls. Everything has souls. When I read that manufacture of personal reality in the intro for Nature Personal Reality, I was really touched right away. And what touches me the most at the very end of that book, where he says, trust no person or thing that tells you to avoid the reality of yourself, or that tells you they're evil and guilty. Instead, trust the vitality of your being and the life that is your own. And yes, I've often been confused about to what extent I create my own reality. I can't go swimming this afternoon at 5:30 and say, I command the sun to stay up till 8 o'clock, and I command the temperature to be 86 degrees. Mary, that's 30 degrees Celsius. And I command that the water be warm and that the people stay out of my way. I don't create that reality. I've had struggles with that. I have to learn the extent to which I create my reality. It's an inner thing. And the things that happen to me, I've chosen. I don't understand how. A lot of them didn't make sense. Getting AIDS, losing a lover, losing 2 partners, 1 to AIDS. Doesn't make sense. But in general, if I look at the deeper picture, I realize I'm just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a meaning to it all. And as in end of Oversoul 7, when I pass on, I will see in Oversoul 7's eyes the joy and vitality and meaning beneath all my days. Thank you.
I'm Sue Rolacek, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I've been reading Seth since I was about 21 years old, so it's been a major influence in my life. For my entire life, I have benefited from reading Seth with all my decision making and, my decisions about major life goals. And Seth helped me to select dreams as a focus for my life and have that as a personal goal. So I focused on my dreams, and it's been a pleasure. And the whole joy and feeling of meaning and purpose in life has just made that I have enjoyed this life a lot. And I can thank Seth for a big contribution of that.
Welcome back. It is time to introduce our next speaker, who is none other than Robert Waggoner. Now, many of you may recognize that name, as he is quite an expert in the field of lucid dreaming. And he's written many books, or I should say 2 books on lucid dreaming, which include Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, and Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. And both are available on Amazon in a variety of formats and languages. He was president of the International Association of the Study of Dreams, and currently he is the co-editor of the online magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience, which, as far as I know, is the only ongoing magazine publication dedicated to the art of lucid dreaming exclusively. Now, he has been a lucid dreamer since 1975 and has logged more than 1,000 lucid dream experiences and counting. He frequently speaks at a variety of conferences and workshops on the science and the practice of lucid dreaming, and he has been invited to speak in person on 5 different continents already. So he's clearly a leader in this incredible field of consciousness study. And of course, the Seth material has been quite a launchpad for him to enable him to dive so deeply into lucid dreaming. So he's been a reader of the Seth material since the mid-70s, and he definitely credits it with allowing him to explore lucid dreaming to this incredible depth and proficiency. And his main website, if you want to find him, is quite easy to remember. It's lucidadvice.com. And the Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine is found at lucid, or I should say dreaminglucid.com. So on social media, you can also find him at facebook.com/Rob Waggoner. And of course, you can find him on Twitter and LinkedIn. And so now, without further ado, let's bring in Robert onto our virtual stage. He will be speaking today on Seth, dreams, and lucid dreams. So let's give him a warm welcome, an etheric warm welcome to our etheric stage.
Hi everyone, I'm Robert Waggoner, and I'm very pleased to present to you about Seth, Dreams, and Lucid Dreams. I'm the author of 2 books, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, and also Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, with co-author Carolyn McCready. I've been a Seth reader since the mid-1970s. One day, one of my brothers came home, and he told me that, hey, you like this metaphysical junk? And he threw the book, The Seth Material, at me. And every time I came to a quote by Seth, I just felt electrified. It was the most incredible, interesting information that I'd ever read. And so I am a long-term Seth reader. So, next slide. So, Seth points out to us that in awake-seeming dreams, you are indeed awake, within, of course, a different psychological framework. You are operating at a relatively high level of awareness, and you are using your inner senses. You will realize that your physical self is sleeping or in a dream state, and that the inner self is fully awake. So what I love about this quote, it happens in June 20th of 1966. So this is about 14 years before the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming will appear. Also, it's clear here that Seth says in awake-seeming dreams, which is what we would nowadays call lucid dreams, you have your inner senses operating, and there's a whole section of Seth material on the inner senses. And then he also says that the inner self is fully awake. And so he differentiates the levels of self here. Next slide. So the American Psychological Association defines lucid dreaming as a dream in which the sleeper is aware that he or she is dreaming and may be able to influence the progress of the dream narrative. Most of us would just call lucid dreaming as realizing in the dream that you're dreaming. You know this is a dream. You might in fact say, wait a second, this is too weird, this is a dream. That's when you know that you're in a dream. Now, next slide. The science of lucid dreaming begins basically in 1980, when the research of Stephen LaBerge appeared in scientific literature. It's interesting how LaBerge himself was a lucid dreamer, but he began to wonder how could you scientifically validate it or prove that this inner experience was really happening. And he realized that you have rapid eye movement during dreams, normally. And so he brought himself into the sleep lab, and he had the REM polygraph pads put on his eyes, and he told people that when he became consciously aware within the dream, he would move his eyes left to right 8 times, and hopefully that would show up on the REM polygraph pad and provide the evidence for lucid dreaming. Next slide. And so here you can see that LOC and ROC, those two central lines, stand for left ocular and right ocular, and that they show that here's the person in the dream state, their eyes are just moving every which way, but suddenly, where I've underlined in red, they begin to move their eyes left to right in synchrony. And so basically at these points, that person is signaling within the dream state, hey, I'm consciously aware within here. And then there in the third line, you see the eyes moving left and right again in tandem. And the person might be signaling, I'm beginning the experiment. And then at the bottom of the fourth line on the left side, you can see the eyes move in synchrony again. He might be saying, oh, I'm ending the experiment. And then at the very end, they signal with their eyes to say, I'm going to wake up. And then they wake up. So this is called the eye signal verification technique, and is basically how the evidence for lucid dreaming came into being. But you can see how you could use lucid dreaming for personal experiments and even for scientific experiments. Next slide. So other neurological evidence came from some of the neurophysiological studies by Ursula Voss and J. Allen Hobson from Harvard and others. But here they used a 19-channel EEG electroencephalogram cap on a person who was a lucid dreamer. And in this image, the top is the person awake and aware, just as we are now. So you can see that upper layer of the brain, the cerebral cortex, is very active. The bottom image of the person with in very blue is that person in the dream state. So there's not really very much activity in the cerebral cortex. But the middle slide of the cerebral cortex starting to light up shows the person in a lucid dream. Suddenly the frontal lateral portions of the cerebral cortex light up. And so these neurological researchers called this a hybrid state of consciousness, because the dreaming brain and the consciously aware brain suddenly became active simultaneously at the same time. Next slide. Here's just another study by Martin Dressler in Germany. Not only did he have an EEG skull cap, he also had the people in an fMRI, and so he could see what the brain activity looked like more exactly. And here they saw the parts of the brain light up that were associated with self-perception, self-assessment, and evaluating thoughts and feelings. And that's basically what happens in a lucid dream. You realize, wait a second, this is a dream, I'm dreaming this. Then you can assess what you want to do. You can evaluate all the potential possibilities and decide which of them seems best on what actions you want to perform. So there's wonderful neurological evidence for lucid dreaming. Next slide. But Seth is bringing up lucid dreaming before the scientific evidence, and he's also talking about it at a much deeper level. Here he brings up the idea of the dream art scientist, and he states, "The true art of dreaming is a science long forgotten by your world. Such an art pursued trains the mind in a new kind of consciousness. Almost anyone can become a satisfied and productive amateur in this art science, but its true fulfillment takes years of training, a strong sense of purpose, and a dedication, as does any true vocation." So the important thing here is that almost anyone can become an amateur in this, but if you want to take it to the deep depths, you really got to get into it with a strong sense of purpose and really focus on it. Next slide. Here I find something really fascinating. This is in Unknown Reality, Volume 2. Seth says, "In the terms of my book, I was a dream art scientist, but I was very dogmatic, and I demanded that others follow my symbols, not their own. And that is why I now so carefully tell you to follow your own ways." So the first time I read that, I was blown away. Basically, Seth is saying that he became a dream art scientist, and it's interesting in some previous existence, and it's interesting to think that in various spiritual and religious traditions, like in Buddhism for 2,000 years, they've had Buddhist dream yoga. And so the purpose of that is basically to achieve enlightenment. And it's makes you wonder, though, if Seth was one of these Buddhist dream yogis who was very dogmatic, and now he's come back and this time to kind of break people away from the dogmatism of other models. Next slide. Seth goes on to say, "You dream, each of you, but there are few great dream artists. Many of the true purposes of dreams have been forgotten, even though these purposes are still being fulfilled. The conscious art of creating, understanding, and using dreams has been largely lost, and the intimate relationship between daily life, world events, and dreams almost completely ignored." Next slide. Seth goes on to say, "The members of some ancient civilizations, including the Egyptians, knew how to be conscious directors of dream activity, how to delve into various levels of dream reality to the fonts of creativity, and they were able to use that source material in their physical world." And so I don't know if everyone knows, but in ancient Egypt, the Egyptologists have realized that there were certain societies of the night. If you can imagine, certain priests and followers who basically avoided the daytime, the daylight, and came out at night. And so they kind of took a different approach, and might have been some of these people who were delving into various levels of dream reality. But it's really fascinating to read these ideas and to think of lucid dreaming going back all the way to the Egyptian times. Next slide. So people often ask me, well, what's the value of lucid dreaming? You become aware within the dream, but where's the value? First, I would say that the value comes from accessing your larger awareness. And that's why I call my first book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. After 10 years of lucid dreaming, I realized that you could ignore the dream figures and ignore the dream setting and just shout out a question to your unconscious mind or your larger awareness or your inner self. You could just ask a question like, "Hey dream, show me something important for me to see." And suddenly the entire lucid dream would change. Or, "Hey dream, let me experience," and then name a concept, and suddenly you're experiencing a concept, just totally full on. So that's one of the values, and something that's really blown people's mind when they interact with this inner self, this inner awareness. Also, number two, you can use lucid dreaming to access inner creativity. So, for example, if you're an artist, you could announce, "Hey dream, show me the most incredible art I can create." And then on the nearby wall, suddenly there's all this art, and you can go and examine it, and it's something that came from your inner self, your larger awareness, but it's there. You accessed it. Or you could announce, "Hey, let me hear the most amazing music I could create when I enter that next room." And you step into the next room, and here's incredible music going on. Or you could also use it to solve problems, to try to invent things. But again, it helps if this is a focus of your area, because if you ask, show me blah, 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 but then you are not connected with whatever that area is, like free energy, then when all the symbols and information start coming to you, you won't get it. It'll be beyond your kind of conscious awareness. So it helps to explore something that you're consciously interested in. And the third level is physical and emotional healing. When my book came out, I had a chapter on physical healing, and I began to immediately get instances of people who improved their physical health, sometimes people who had dramatic physical healings. And also, there was a lot of emotional healings as well. And sometimes, of course, the two are connected, as Seth points out frequently. But in the next slide, you get a sense of that. Next slide. So this came to the online magazine that I co-edit with Lucy Gillis up in Vancouver, a longtime Seth reader. The magazine's called The Lucid Dreaming Experience. And in the September 2020 issue, this gentleman, Matthew Zinkar, wrote that he had developed eye pigment dispersion syndrome. And basically what happens is that the pigmentation in your eye begins to flake away, and then it clogs up the drainage valve of your eye, which results in eye pressure, and if it gets too bad, then you can actually go blind. And so in this, what he shows here is in April 2014, he had his first eye scan because they were concerned about his eyes. So in April 2014, the top level, you can see the numbers there. Then in January of 2020, they did a new OCT scan, and you can see how the numbers have declined, that his eyes aren't doing nearly as well as they were previously. But then on May 3rd of 2020, he becomes lucidly aware. He remembered he wanted to heal his eyes. He had read about healing experiences on my website, and he put his hands up to his eyes to send them healing intent. He said he saw this brilliant white flash in his eye in the lucid dream. And a couple weeks later, he was at the doctor's. They took a new eye scan. And when the doctor saw the results, he said, it seems there's been some kind of reversion. And he showed the patient the result. And this Matthew was blown away and told the doctor that he had done this in a lucid dream. And the doctor said, well, however it happened. His eyesight or his eye pigmentation had improved markedly. And so I think that's just a wonderful example. This guy's probably not a Seth reader and doesn't really care about any of that, but he made a transformational change. Next slide. So Seth, in Unknown Reality, he writes, cellular life is affected by your dreams. Healings can take place in the dream state, where events at another order of existence alter the cells themselves. Rupert has been exploring the reality of dream levels, and in so doing, he is beginning to glimpse their significance. So I think it's kind of amazing here to think if the pigmentation of your eyes went away, oh my gosh, could you have the cells go back and repigment your eyes? That's to me just kind of is a mind-blowing idea. But here Seth says that cellular life can actually be altered within dreams and also awake-seeming dreams. Next slide. Now this was a wonderful example of something that came to me about 4 years after my book, first book came out. This young guy wrote me. He said he was a former meth addict. And he said he grew up in a dysfunctional family. When he was a young guy, he started using drugs. He got hooked on meth when he was like 16 years old. The cops busted him, and he went to rehab, but it didn't work. And then a couple years later, he's back on meth. He got caught again, and this time he got put in a 60-day drug rehab program. And he said he was really bored out of his mind, so he decided one day when he was at his drug counselor, he saw that he had my book, and so the kid asked if he could read the book because he was bored out of his mind. He saw that in a lucid dream you could interact with your larger awareness. And so one time he became lucid and he asked, hey dream, show me something important for me to see. And then this non-visible voice, the inner awareness, responded, would you like to see what your life will be if you continue using drugs? And this young guy said, sure, show me. And he said for the next 5 or 10 minutes, it was like a video of all the people he would hurt, all the trouble he would cause, all the damage he would do to his own body, just basically the devastation that would result by continuing to use drugs. And he said when he woke up from that lucid dream, that was the first time ever he realized that he had to stop being a drug addict. And so he wrote me this email 2 years later because he had gotten his associate's degree in a community college. He said he knew he would write me when he got his associate's degree because then that would show him that he could stay sober, stay clean for 2 years. But he also sent me some other examples of his conversations with his larger awareness. And I'll tell you, they utterly blew my mind. They were just incredibly deep, fantastic, and wise. Next slide. So here's something that happened in Bogota, Colombia. I was invited down there on 2 separate occasions to give workshops. And the first time I went, there in the front row, there was this wonderful lucid dreamer, because I could tell she was a great lucid dreamer because she had asked the kind of questions that a good lucid dreamer would ask. But here's the thing. She had all this pain in her face. You could just see her face. It just had so much pain in it. And so I'd always answer her questions, but I wondered, boy, what's all that pain about? 6 months later, they have me come back to Bogota and do another workshop, and in through the door walks this woman, but now 70 to 80% of the pain is gone from her face. She looked taller, younger, more attractive, the whole thing. And I went up to her and I asked her, what happened to you? You look so different. And she said, at your first workshop 6 months ago, you talked about emotional healing in a lucid dream. And I had never thought about that before. But you explained how to go about it, how to make up a plan beforehand. And so after your workshop, I had a lucid dream. I had a plan on how to get emotionally healed. I called out for a spiritual figure. The spiritual figure appeared. I asked the spiritual figure to help heal my heart. The spiritual figure put out its hands, and from its hands, this brilliant light went right into her heart. And she said she had this ecstatic feeling, and she knew she was being healed. The interesting thing she told me, though, was this, that she can still remember the traumatic events that happened in her life, but now there's no pain associated with them. It's like the pain was totally resolved in this lucid dream experience. And she was just totally a transformed person. Next slide. So besides accessing your larger awareness, physical and emotional healing, accessing inner creativity, you can also experiment with time and space. Find out who you were in a past life. Find out your experience in a future life. It's truly amazing what you can do in a lucid dream. Also, you can see about influencing waking events. From the lucid dream state, put energy into a waking event and then see what happens. And finally, lucid dreaming's value comes from showing us that reality creating really occurs by virtue of the mind, its beliefs, expectations, emotions, focus, intent. That's really how reality creating occurs. Also, you can use lucid dreaming for spiritual growth. You can do spiritual practices in a lucid dream. You can meditate. You can do all sorts of wild things in a lucid dream. And it allows you to kind of cut through illusion, which I think is really realizing that you co-create your experienced reality. And that's why I put this little Manjusri, because with that knife, he cuts through illusion. And finally, as Seth might say, you graduate from this system once you realize that. Next slide. So Seth says in the early session, book 6, when you are considering dream reality, it is easier for you to understand that you construct the reality therein. You find it more difficult to understand the same thing about physical reality. As a result, however, you are somewhat less apt to accept dream reality as actual, and I must tell you that it is. So this is exactly what I found as a lucid dreamer. It was easy for me to realize because I already believed that my mind created the dreams. And so it was easy to see that when that angry dream figure was coming in a lucid dream, if I sent it love and compassion and understanding, then the angry dream figure would become smaller. And I could see, oh, when I change my mind about it, my reaction to it, then it changes. That's very easy to see. But also, as I saw that happen in my dreams and lucid dreams, I realized that, oh my gosh, this is actually how physical reality is happening. And so that's one of the most important lessons, I think, of lucid dreaming. Next slide. Before you can be allowed into systems of reality that are more extensive and open, you must first learn to handle energy and see, through physical materializations, the concrete result of thought and emotion. As a child forms mud pies from dirt, so you form your civilization out of thoughts and emotions, and then see what you have created, and you must deal with it on its terms. This is what I love about Seth. He just says, these are the steps. You have to learn how that mental and emotional energy becomes physically materialized. And then you have to deal with what you've created. And sometimes the best way of dealing with what you've created is changing your thoughts and emotions. And by doing that, you can change the system that you're in. Next slide. So, Seth goes on to say that oftentimes you are aware that you are dreaming, and you are sometimes aware while in physical existence that you are dreaming. You can change an unpleasant dream by realizing that you are creating it, and that the problems are of your own making. You leave physical reality when you come to the same conclusion. The problems that you solve while in it are quite legitimate. You also know when you no longer need the particular context. So I like that part. Next slide. You leave physical reality when you come to the same realization that you create your waking and dreaming experience. I think that's really just important to understand how you graduate from this physical reality system to a different reality. And lucid dreaming can help us see this, because there our thoughts create the perceived reality, but then we realize, if we're smart, that the same thing is happening in regular dreams and also in the waking experience. And for that reason, that's why it's so important to get on board with having mindful and creative constructions instead of destructive and unhappy ones. Next slide. Within dream reality, you are much freer. The ego is not present. The waking consciousness, dear friends, is not the ego. The ego is merely a small portion of waking consciousness. The ego is the portion of waking consciousness that deals with physical manipulation. Waking consciousness is taken in to the dream state, but the ego is not. So it's important to kind of understand Seth's view of personality. The ego is the portion of the self that's directly interfacing with waking reality. And so, for example, the ego, when you see some attractive person, you might brush your hair or do something, or you might suck in your gut or whatever to look more attractive. That's the ego. But does that happen in the dream state? In the dream state, do you play with your hair? In the dream state, do you suck in your gut? In the dream state, do you try to impress, the other dream figures? And really that kind of ego sense really is diminished in regular dreams and also lucid dreams. But it's important to see that there's the ego, there's waking consciousness, and then there's this inner awareness, inner self that exists in the lucid dreams. Next slide. The inner ego is quite familiar with the existence of the physically oriented ego, but the physically oriented ego is not usually familiar with its inner counterpart. When through training the ego becomes more aware of this inner self, the whole personality benefits. Projection represents practical application. Such experience allows you to unite various aspects of the self and to bring the whole self into sharper focus. And so I think the important thing here is that part of Seth's work and part of the joy in doing this practice of lucid dreaming is to begin to connect the inner self with the outer ego and the waking consciousness to bring them together as more of a unit. And when you do that, everyone benefits. Next slide. So when Seth writes, such experience allows you to unite various aspects of the self and to bring the whole self into sharper focus, I think what that helps, how does that matter? It matters because now the ego and the waking consciousness begin to accept more broadly the inner support, intuitions, and knowledge of the inner self. And also the ego and waking consciousness will begin to accept probabilities and dreaming as legitimate fields of endeavors, which they can use to alter waking experience. Also, I think when you begin to get on this path, you start to see the larger structure of all these incarnations leading to kind of a value fulfillment. So there's kind of a meaning to life in a new way. Also, when you have these experiences, you kind of frequently let go of a fear of death and many other ego fears. You know that there's more to you than the waking self. There's this whole inner self that's ongoing. And basically, you live life more fully and kind of advance the purposes of the whole self. Next slide. Playful persistence. I love that Seth quote, "If it's not fun, stop doing it." And so when it comes to lucid dreaming, some people become really kind of dogmatic and kind of order themselves around. And when it comes to lucid dreaming practices, if you can make them fun, then they're much easier to do. So you got to tweak those ideas and practices so that they become fun. And that might include rewarding yourself when you have a lucid dream, or just rewarding yourself when you remember a dream. Or imagining the incredible lucid adventures you might have. That's playful. That's kind of the way a kid would play around with lucid dreams. How much fun you can have while lucidly aware. You don't always have to do serious stuff. You can play around and do all sorts of wild things in a lucid dream. But whatever the case, you have to start where you are and build from there. Next slide. Seth gets on this when he goes, "Your attitude toward what is possible determines what is possible for you in very definite terms. Your attitude creates possibilities and impossibilities. What you expect, you create. And that is the beginning and end of it, whether you are speaking of psychic or physical matters." Next slide. So here's a funny story. A month or two ago, I called up my 96-year-old mom who lives in an assisted living care facility. And she told me, well, I want to tell you about a strange experience I had. I go, okay. She said, last night I was about 6 or 7 feet above myself, and I was looking down at myself in bed. So what does that mean? And I just started to laugh, because this is the first time in our history that my mom and I have talked about out-of-body experiences. And so I explained to her, Mom, you're having an out-of-body experience. And I explained what out-of-body experiences were all about. But it's incredible just to see that here she is, 96 years old, and she's beginning to recognize that she's having out-of-body experiences. Next slide. Also, I wanted to say, sometimes people wonder, well, boy, did Seth really have anything to say, that science later proved? And in this particular case, very much so. In 1966, he's talking about lucid dreaming. The evidence comes out in 1980, 1981. Then also, one time, he was talking to someone who wanted to lucid dream, and Seth encouraged them to bring into their diet more eggs and more asparagus. And he said that there are chemicals there that would help them with these projections. And it's interesting that some people use a supplement to help have a lucid dream called galantamine. And it's the active ingredient in Alzheimer's drugs, but it's derived from the red spider lily and certain other lilies. And of course, asparagus is part of the lily family. And so it's kind of wild that Seth, 40 years before all this, is actually hinting at a chemical compound that might help. Next slide. But overall, we live in a projected universe. So Seth says, in one respect, and in quite a legitimate and objective manner, all thoughts are also projections. They leave you in an actual manner and exert an objective effect. The thoughts themselves, also psychic realities, were projected outward, changing and affecting the physical environment in direct and objective terms. Indeed, they form the environment. So the important thing here is whether you're thinking in a dream, a lucid dream, or waking reality, or the after-death state, your thoughts are being projected out and influencing the perceived environment around you. Indeed, they form the environment. Next slide. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. I just want to thank the California Seth organizers for inviting me. If you ever have any questions 3 or 4 or 5 months from now, you can always go to my book's website, lucidadvice.com, and send in a question. So I'm going to stop this recording, and then I'll get on to the Zoom recording with you.
Welcome back, everybody. That was an excellent presentation by Robert Waggoner, and now we have him here with us. So we're very excited for this live Q&A interaction. So I'm just going to tip it over to Lilia and ask, well, first of all, thank you, Robert, for joining us. That's a really super glad. Want to give that big thank you.
Thanks to all of you, and thanks to all the people who worked behind the scenes to make this happen. It's really a great event.
Awesome. So Lilia, I'm going to cue it over to you. See if you have any goodies for us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. Robert, so to begin, how did cultivating yourself as a dream art scientist change you?
You know, I think one of the things that helped me, dreaming broke down my structured Midwest early upbringing idea of the world. So, you know, I'm in a family, we're a Protestant family, we go to church every Sunday. But when I'm 12 and 13 and I'm having past life dreams, I'm thinking like, what? Wait a second, you know, where's that? I'm not really finding that anywhere. And then when I'd have dreams that were about the future and all, then I realized, wow, you know, that time isn't this linear thing. That in my mind, the way I explained it to myself was that God existed in a timeless dimension, and so that's how you can have precognitive dreams, because a timeless dimension exists. And so by following this dreaming path, it began to break down that kind of strict view we have of oneself and begin to open it up to that inner source of information that then kept pushing me and guiding me and making me question things to grow as a person.
Wonderful. As a follow-up, do you have, or have you had a lucid dream experience that you found was most impactful for you? A particular lucid dream experience you found most impactful?
You know, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the talk, but after my father passed away, a few months later, I decided I'd try to find him in a lucid dream. And all the dream figures told me, don't do it. It's not time. It's too early. And because they were all in unanimity, I said, okay, dream figures, explain every symbol in this dream. And I pointed at everything, and they explained in the lucid dream every symbol. So when I woke up, I thought, okay, you know, maybe my dad's involved in some deep work, and maybe it's not time to hunt him down, so I'll let him come to me. And it was 3 years later, I see this gold ladder, and coming down the gold ladder is my father, and I began to laugh because he had such a bad haircut. And I thought, this guy cannot even get a good haircut in the after death state. But then I wondered, you know, so now I'm lucidly aware, I wondered, is this my father as a dream symbol, as a projection of my mind, or is this my father as his spiritual essence? And so he comes down the ladder, we greet each other, and so I begin to question him. I say, hey, Dad, you're from the land of the dead. When do you think Mom's gonna pass away? And he said, oh, probably in 2 to 6 years. I said, of what? He said, a heart condition. And that really surprised me because she'd never had any heart problems. And then I asked him one more question, he replied, and then he told me to please be quiet because he had come to tell me things. And then he began to tell me things about the family. Anyway, 23 months later, my mom almost passed us away of a heart condition. Wow. And then about 3 years after that, she almost passes away again because she had been taking a prescribed drug that they later realized was actually harming people's hearts and almost killed her. Oh. But she made it through that period and continues to live on. So that was one of those really kind of powerful ones, you know, having that interaction, because I know a lot of people deal with grief or, oh, you know, now that they're gone, I can't tell them all this, that, and the other. Well, they're not really as gone as you might think. You know, in a lucid dream, you can have those kind of interactions. But also, I've just had extraordinarily powerful lucid dreams of interacting with the larger awareness. Probably the one that really blew my mind was when I asked in a lucid dream, I wanted to hear my feeling tone. And I know Michael brought that up earlier, the idea of feeling tone. And so I wanted to know, could you in a lucid dream experience concepts? I shouted that out, and I went on to have just a wild experience as this little appeared high above me. It became this cone of yeah. And finally it vibrated me out of existence. And now, if you can imagine, there's some little thread of me in my larger awareness that's seeing this cone of awe. And then it had to recapitulate me, and it was thinking, now which one was that? So now you're kind of at this oversoul level, hearing its thoughts. And finally, it recapitulated me, and I was sitting in a lotus position, looking at the house that I was sleeping in. And I thought, what just happened to me? And I thought, oh, is that awe? But anyway, one funny thing from my first book that's been translated into Korean, I've gotten a lot of emails from Korean lucid dreamers who have just got onto this thing of feeling tone. And some said that they've done it a number of times in their lucid dreams, asked to experience their feeling tone, and it's always been the same. And so it's quite interesting to see. But I just wanted to know, is it a feeling? Is it a tone? What is it? And that's what I asked to experience in a lucid dream.
Incredible. Ask and it shall be given. So from Chiron, O'Keefe, she's asking that sometimes in a lucid dream, it seems as if she's alone. So she is asking to speak with a teacher or the oversoul, but ends up wandering alone. So how does one move into that stage where you can begin to connect when, let's say, the attempts don't seem to quite catch on at first?
Right. So I encourage people just to take it very easily when you begin to interact with your larger awareness, because normally it's a non-visible voice that will reply, and also asking a simple question like, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. That's a good open-ended question, and you can see what happens. Or you can ask, hey, dream, show me something hilarious. Or, hey, dream, show me whatever. And when you do that kind of thing and get a response, then you realize that, okay, I've connected here. But it's what I think, though, is that in waking world, we're socialized to expect another figure there. And when you're interacting with the larger awareness, oftentimes it's the non-visible awareness that responds, whether creatively or by showing you things or by speaking. So just go deeper into it and see what happens. I myself wouldn't worry too much about having crowds there or anything like that.
Right. And just a little patience.
Yeah.
Perhaps just with the process too. When we're so excited, we just want to dive in. Another question here, perhaps a little bit more technical. Robert, do you find that if you are physically tired but mentally alert, you can lucid dream more easily?
Right. So that is interesting. What you notice is sometimes you'll have certain conditions that seem to result in spontaneous lucid dreams. Like if you go outside and you work all day in the hot sun, you will fall asleep like a log that night, but there's a good chance you'll have a lucid dream. And there's something about being physically exhausted.
Yes.
And it allows you to have a lucid dream. Seth talked about sometimes that certain chemicals were created within your body that led to this happening. Sometimes something as simple as putting fresh sheets on the bed, just having totally fresh sheets so that you feel incredibly relaxed and welcomed into the sleep realm. Sometimes that leads to a lucid dream. So if you play around with that, sometimes you'll see that there's certain characteristics that'll help you become lucid.
Okay, some good supports to cultivate. From Helen Stewart, have you done something to consciously change probabilities in the dream? Is this process different from other types of lucid dreams?
Yeah, that it's interesting. When I was writing my first book, I ran into a probability of myself because I saw that he had already written a book, and he was a professor of psychology, and he had written a book and he was doing quite well and all that. And I saw the campus he was at. And when I woke up, I thought, well, if that probability can write a book, I can write a book, in this realm. I also enjoyed interviewing a woman for this magazine that I create, the Lucid Dreaming Experience. Her name's Shirley Black. And she began to have a lot of lucid dreams after a near-death experience. And she said in one of her lucid dreams, when she was like a geeky 14-year-old who was having a hard time integrating into high school, she asked to meet her 19-year-old self. And suddenly she meets her 19-year-old self, and her 19-year-old self is at college, has tons of boyfriends, is having the time of her life. And when her 14-year-old self saw that her 19-year-old self was doing great, she said when she woke up, she just thought, okay, I'm going to make it through this high school period. And when I get to college, I'm going to have a lot of fun. And then what was funny, she said, is that when she was 19, she had a dream that she went back and talked to her 14-year-old self and encouraged the 14-year-old self, not to get bummed out by the structure of things. So that shows how you can play around with this. My good friend Lucy Gillis, who helps me co-edit the Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine, she plays around with probability, meeting probable selves all the time. And sometimes she'll call some of them together and they'll get together and compare notes. So that's the beautiful open platform of lucid dreaming. You can literally explore whatever is your interest.
Gorgeous. We've been talking about lucid dreaming specifically as we're weaving it for ourselves. So I'm wondering about lucid dreaming and its relationship to mass events, and such as the pandemic. Could we accelerate the timeline, let's say, potentially on the pandemic, and us being able to resolve it in a heart-centered way, perhaps?
Well, you can definitely influence your own personal experience and probably your family's personal experience with the pandemic. Seth talked about the idea of mass dreams, that at a certain level of dreaming, sometimes the mass consciousness of the planet gets together, and in order to kind of figure out how they're going to navigate some issues, they'll have a mass dream. And I think it was about, I'll tell you when it was. It was December 7th of 2019. I had a dream, and here's my dream symbol of tornadoes all over the place. And in the dream, I'm not worried because I know that this is my dream symbol. And when I woke up, I thought, oh crap, this is the same thing I dreamt about before 9/11 happened. And now I know something big is going to happen, but now it's going to kill a lot more people than 9/11. And so I woke up and I thought, okay, it's going to happen. It's going to be widespread. And if I would have been paying attention, 3 weeks later when they started to announce that, oh, there's this strange virus in China, that's, then I might have put it all together. But again, these mass dreams occur. And so at a mass level, we're dealing with it. Seth said that, you could influence things just by your thinking about it and projecting positive energy. But the idea of actually changing this entire mass event, I think it just happens at a whole different level of magnitude. And so
yes,
I don't know if that butterfly wing can change the entire world. But
so if I can interject here a little bit, my sense is it's like you're shifting through parallel realities. So through your conscious dreaming experiences, you can actually shift to the versions of Earth that have a faster resolution. You're not changing the version of Earth you're in, you're actually shifting to that version of Earth that's more in alignment with that. That's just a thought popped in. Because there's which world, which you, right? There's always that going on.
Right, and if people read The Individual, The Nature of Mass Beliefs, Seth in there is talking about epidemics and pandemics, and how they relate to the mass consciousness and all. It's really fascinating. So I encourage everyone to go back to their individual, not the individual and nature of mass events, and read that. It's really a mind blow.
It's so relevant for today, and it's written decades ago, and they talk about literally, it's like you're reading it as if it was channeled directly for today. It's amazing.
Exactly.
We have time for one more question. I mean, we're going to run a tiny bit over, but this is such a delicious little question. Speaking of mass dreams, from Sue Rolichek. Speaking of mass dreams, how often do you meet up with other lucid dreamers in a planned way?
In my first book, Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self, I have a chapter on mutual lucid dreams, where you intend to meet up with other lucid dreamers. And it's really quite something. What happens sometimes, though, is like you'll meet family members or whatever, and you'll see that they still have rapid eye movement. I remember one time I met my friend Mo, who lives in the Bay Area, and she came walking into the restaurant. I was lucidly aware, and I ran up to her and I said, Mo, do you see this is a dream? We're dreaming this. But she still has rapid eye movement. So I grab her around the waist and I begin to levitate, and we're levitating higher and higher. And I say, Mo, do you see we're levitating? This is a lucid dream. But she still has rapid eye movement. And then I got so frustrated that I couldn't get her to become lucidly aware that I put my fingers into a peace sign and I shoved it in her face. And I said, do you see this peace sign? You can use it as a symbol to become lucidly aware anytime you want. And I left it at that, woke up. The next morning, she didn't write me, nothing, all that. So 3 months later, in waking reality, I'm in Burlingame, California. I call up Mo. I say, hey, I have some time if you want to get together for lunch. She says, sure. She tells me where to meet her. So now it's it's noon. She's walking down the sidewalk in Burlingame, and in physical reality, she walks right up to me and shoves a peace sign right in my face. And I said, Mo, why are you doing that? And she said, I don't know. I just felt like it.
Wow, that's great.
So when you have those kind of experiences, you realize that at these other levels, we're connecting, we're passing on information and energy, and that's how it is. But again, thank you guys so much for having this conference, and it's a lot of fun to be here. And so I'll let you get on. It sounds like you're going to have a break here. And,
yes, so we are, yeah. So thank you so much for coming here. We really appreciate this, and we'll definitely be doing more productions, and so you'll be hearing from us again at some point. So yeah, thank you everybody. We are indeed going to sign off now for the break. So let's move our bodies, our physical bodies, take a break, and we will catch you in about 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks.